Chapter 150. The sun rose as usual. It was a rare day of good weather. The blue sky was devoid of any other color. It was as pure as a girl's dream. However, Marquis Vincent's face was gloomy as he looked at the burnt walls of Silvery Moon City. He didn't know what had happened in Silvery Moon City, but he could guess from the new mental state of the defenders. This battle was not going to be easy. Just as he furrowed his brows, Silvery Moon City suddenly erupted in cheers. Not long after, he saw a slender figure standing on the walls of Silvery Moon City. She looked so fragile, as if a gust of wind could blow her away. However, she seemed to be extremely determined and persistent, as if nothing could break her spine. The crimson figure stood at the top of the city wall, causing the entire Silver Moon City to erupt in an uproar. Every time she waved her hand, deafening cheers would erupt from the city. "Is that the half-elven queen?" Marquis Vincent's tone was filled with complicated emotions. Fear, envy, anger, and even possessiveness that couldn't be concealed. "Yes, Lord Marquis." Viscount Austen nodded, but his heart was filled with doubts. Since when did Queen Aisha have such high prestige in Silvery Moon City? Marquis Vincent looked at the rising morale on the walls of Silvery Moon City and felt that he couldn't wait any longer. The half-elves didn't seem like they would surrender. They were prepared to follow the path of the northern frontier to the end. Thus, he gritted his teeth and said, "Pass down my orders. Attack the city." "Yes." Woo! The ear-piercing sound of the bugle interrupted Queen Aisha's show. She frowned and pushed away the maid supporting her. She pointed outside the city and said loudly, "My people, the enemy has raised their butcher's knife. What should we do?" "Fight to the end. Fight to the end." At this moment, the morale in Silvery Moon City had reached its peak. Many half-elven soldiers couldn't wait to fight to the death with the eastern frontier. If this had happened to the half-elves in the past, this would have never happened. In the past, the city would have surrendered long ago. Although the half-elf army lacked training and their battle strength was not high, their will to fight had never been so firm. Amidst the deafening battle cries, the tragic siege finally began. Soldiers gathered like ants, arrows like locusts. The densely packed soldiers of the eastern region braved the rain of arrows, filled the trenches, rushed to the bottom of the city wall, set up ladders, and then climbed up. What greeted them were arrows, stones, and hot oil that kept falling. Shrill screams and pained cries immediately became the main sound of this battlefield. The glaring red that could not be concealed was the main color of this battlefield. The half-elves and the people of the eastern region worked together to turn Silvermoon City into a meat mill. The city wall became modeled after such a fierce battle. Corpses piled up on top of the city wall, and blood flowed down the battlements, mixing with the blood on the city wall. The once beautiful and exquisite Silver Moon City had become terrifying and horrifying. The soil beneath the city walls had also become soft and muddy, stained with a faint layer of dark red. It was not until the sun set in the west that the Eastern Region army stopped their attack. Countless soldiers retreated like a tide, leaving behind a grotesque pile of corpses. These corpses surrounded Silvermoon City, making it look like hell had returned to the world. Immediately, raging flames ignited both inside and outside the city. The two sides were burning the corpses and cleaning up the battlefield. The air was filled with the stench of burnt flesh, making one nauseous. Marquis Vincent saw the tenacity of the half-elf defenders on the first day. He could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. He could not understand at all. Where did the weak and incompetent half-elves who immediately surrendered when they met the Imperial army go? How did they become a completely different race overnight? What made him even more disappointed was that from the words of the Eastern Region soldiers who rushed to the top of the city and then retreated, the defenders were all half-elves. There were no humans. Therefore, the Black Cavalry was not in the city. This was not beyond Marquis Vincent's expectation. If he were Colin, he would not use the precious cavalry to defend the city. Instead, he would deploy them outside the city and wait for the Eastern Region's army to attack the city. When they were exhausted, he would kill them from the back and make the final decision. It was also because he was worried about the Black Cavalry that he did not know where they were hiding that Marquis Vincent felt uneasy even when he was commanding the army to attack the city. He did not dare to attack with all his strength and had to leave most of his troops to guard the rear. At this moment, Marquis Vincent was caught between a rock and a hard place. The idea of withdrawing the army once again appeared in his mind, but in the end, he rejected it. He could not withdraw to the Eastern Region with his tail between his legs. Otherwise, he would never be able to wash away the shame of being defeated by the half-elves. With such a shame, how could he inherit the position of Duke of the Eastern Region with a clear conscience? How could he make the Eastern Region's vassals willingly swear loyalty to him? More than half of the Sky Horse Legion had already been destroyed by him. If he still could not take Silvermoon City, then he would not be able to get past his father. It must be known that the Duke of St. Prospero had many children, especially the Earl of Avon, who was so intelligent that even his father was somewhat afraid of him. He, Vincent, was not the only candidate for the Duke's position. Therefore, Marquis Vincent could only grit his teeth and continue to attack the city. At this time, he was like a gambler who had lost all his money. He knew that he would go bankrupt if he continued, but he simply could not stop. At dawn the next day, with the rumbling of the military drums, the siege began once again. Primitive, bloody, brutal, human lives were just cold numbers in this kind of battle. They would not attract the slightest bit of pity or hesitation from the commander. Indeed, there was no room for too much benevolence in a war. It was a sign of weakness. Once it was discovered by the enemy and used, it would be the beginning of a disaster. At this time, the half-elves' casualties were extremely serious. Fortunately, Queen Aisha and Colin's operation had successfully stimulated their blood. A large number of new soldiers were immediately recruited and quickly replenished the city walls. Every once in a while, Queen Elsa would personally come to the city tower to patrol. Every time her figure appeared, the half-elves on the front lines would erupt with amazing fighting strength. However, compared to the half-elves, the Eastern Region's army was still more elite. On the third day, the southern city walls of Silvermoon City were almost lost. Fortunately, Colin saw that the situation was not good. He hurriedly ordered the Knight of Rigo and the Knights of Telda to lead the Angeli family's army and the House of St. Hilda's army to help. Only then were the Eastern Region's soldiers pushed back. This setback made the Eastern Region's people feel a trace of despair. On the fourth day, the siege temporarily stopped. Chapter 151. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Walking at the top of Silvermoon City, the smell of rotting corpses made Queen Aisha want to vomit. However, she held it in and shook the hands of the soldiers who were guarding the city with her white silk-gloved right hand. The half-elf soldiers were so excited that they almost fainted when they were able to be in close contact with their goddess. The bloody battles of the past 3 days seemed to have become insignificant. Colin followed behind Queen Aisha and watched as she consoled the soldiers who were guarding the city. He suddenly understood why many politicians like to play wife politics. In terms of being close to the people and winning their hearts, women had a huge advantage. Rubbing his chin, Colin suddenly felt that he should let Vera come over and learn from Queen Aisha. She might come in handy in the future. The consolation lasted for the entire morning. In the end, even the soldiers who were guarding the city started to feel sorry for Queen Aisha and requested for her to return to the palace to rest. Queen Aisha had no choice but to accept the good advice and end the day. After they got down from the city tower, Colin helped Queen Aisha into the carriage. Just as he was about to get on the horse, he noticed a commotion by the roadside. He didn't want to pay attention to it, but he saw a familiar skinny figure from the corner of his eye. Waving his hand to summon a guard, Colin asked, "What's going on over there?" "Lord Viscounts, we have caught a survivor of the Savoy family and are preparing to banish her from Silvermoon City." After the coup, Queen Aisha confiscated all the assets of the Savoy family when she was settling accounts with them. However, she didn't make things difficult for the family members and only banished them from Silvermoon City. He didn't expect that there would be someone hiding in the city. Bring her here. Yes. Soon, a familiar face was brought in front of Colin. Kathy? Why didn't you leave Silvermoon City? Colin's former maid immediately knelt on the ground and sobbed. Lord Viscounts, the Savoy family has nothing left. Where can we go if we leave Silvermoon City? Are we going to hide in the countryside for the rest of our lives and waste our lives in the fields? Looking at the other party's pitiful appearance, Colin was unmoved. He sneered and said, "What? Is becoming an ordinary farmer a waste of your life?" Kathy raised her tear-stained face and cried, "Sir, even if I want to become an ordinary farmer, it's impossible. My surname, my appearance, if I don't have the corresponding status, it will only become a curse. If I leave Silvermoon City like this, I'll be living a life worse than death." Colin raised his eyebrows. He felt that this Kathy was quite interesting. She was so young, but she had seen the cruelty of reality and the ugliness of human nature so clearly. "All right, I'll give you a chance now." "Thank you for your kindness, don't thank me yet. I want you to go to the Eastern Army camp. Do you dare?" Kathy was stunned for a moment, then nodded firmly, "Sir, I dare." "Good. If you succeed this time, I can promise you that I'll give the Savoy family the title of Baron in the half-elven kingdom." Hearing this, Queen Aisha lifted the curtain and nodded to Kathy, indicating that she had recited Colin's promise. Kathy's face was filled with joy. As long as she could keep the Savoy family's title of nobility, there was nothing she couldn't do. "Lord Viscounts, may I know what you want me to do?" Under the pitch-black night sky, Marquis Vincent could clearly see countless cavalrymen lined up neatly. Their bodies were covered in black armor, revealing only a pair of cold and indifferent eyes. Thousands of cavalrymen lined up neatly, spears held horizontally in front of them. Under the moonlight, they seemed to have the terrifying power to pierce through the sky. Slowly, the cavalrymen began to move forward. Their speed wasn't fast, but they silently revealed an unstoppable force. It seemed that no matter who stood in their way, they would be mercilessly crushed. Gradually, the cavalrymen began to speed up. The neat formation also began to change. Intentionally or unintentionally, they intertwined to form a cold face. With an indifferent expression, he looked down at the pitch-black land. "Colin Angeli." Marquis Vincent suddenly recognized the face. As if they heard his exclamation, the cavalrymen instantly increased their speed to the maximum. Countless black warhorses, black armor, and black spears converged into a black torrent that surged toward Marquis Vincent. Marquis Vincent subconsciously reached for his waist, but he couldn't find his knight's sword. In a panic, he looked back, but he found that there was no one behind him. When he wanted to run, he felt that his legs were firmly nailed to the ground, and he couldn't move at all. His body instinctively leaned back until it was level with the ground. When he opened his eyes, he could see the dark sky and the cold blood moon. However, the cavalrymen still charged at him. The black spears converged into a forest of death, and Marquis Vincent was about to be torn into pieces. He couldn't resist, and he could only watch as the cavalrymen charged at him with a ferocious expression. Suddenly, Marquis Vincent felt that a large hand reached down from the dark sky and lifted him up. Countless spears passed by his feet, and then disappeared into the dark void. "Ah!" Marquis Vincent screamed, and he woke up from the nightmare. Who, he greedily breathed in and out, like a fish that just came out of the water. Marquis Vincent looked around, and then lowered his head to look at himself. He felt that his body was covered in cold sweat, and it was very uncomfortable. He rubbed his eyes hard, and only then did he realize that everything was just a dream. Lying down again, Marquis Vincent knew that he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. Black cavalry. Colin Angeli, he muttered these two names that made him unable to sleep, and his eyes were staring at the top of the tent, thinking about something. Marquis? Marquis? In a daze, Marquis Vincent suddenly realized that someone was calling him. He woke up again, and only then did he realize that it was already morning. What's wrong? Marquis Vincent, we just caught a half-elf who escaped from Silvery Moon City. She said that she's a descendant of the Savoy family. Savoy family? Marquis Vincent hurriedly sat up from the bed, and ordered, "Bring her to me immediately." Soon, Kathy was brought to Marquis Vincent. Marquis Vincent looked at the half-elf girl with a cautious expression, and his first sentence scared her quite a bit. She only heard him ask in an extremely cold tone. "Colin sent you, didn't he?" Chapter 152. Colin, you sent that Kathy to the Eastern Border Army camp, will it work? Inside the palace, Queen Aisha raised her head from a pile of documents and stretched her body, revealing her beautiful curves to Colin. Why would it not work? Colin laughed, his eyes unrestrainedly admiring the half-elf beauty in front of him. Queen Aisha personally poured a cup of deer blood wine for Colin and another for herself. She doubtfully asked, "We just used Prince William to trick them once, will they fall for it again?" Colin drank the wine in one gulp and asked, "Do you know how the hunters of the northern frontier hunt dire wolves?" Queen Aisha shook her head. Although she did not understand why Colin suddenly changed the topic, she still looked at Colin with her bright eyes, indicating for him to continue. Dire wolves, especially white wolves, are extremely difficult to deal with. Their fighting strength is extremely strong, and most hunters will not choose to fight them head-on, because the direwolf's final counterattack will cause the hunter to pay a heavy price. Therefore, the best way to deal with them is to use traps. However, direwolves are very smart, and when they come across small animal corpses in the forest, they will not touch them at all, because they also understand that it is very likely that it is a bait set by the hunter. The experienced hunter's way of dealing with this is to chase after the dire wolf and constantly harass it, not giving it a chance to fight back, but at the same time, not allowing it to hunt in peace. After a long time, the dire wolf will be tortured by exhaustion and hunger. At this time, it will also not be able to resist the temptation of small animal corpses. Even if it is likely to be a hunter's trap, it will still feel lucky and think that if it swallows the bait, it will still have the strength to fight back. Queen Aisha nodded thoughtfully, "So, Kathy is the bait you threw out. Even if it is easy for Marquis Vincent to see through it, you still think that he will not be able to resist the temptation." "Yes. Right now, the Eastern Army is like a white wolf that is exhausted and in a dilemma. If you throw it a bait, even if it knows that it may be a trap, it will still bite it." Indeed. Queen Aisha's eyes were bright, and her tall and beautiful nose and slightly pursed red lips gave her a demure and intelligent temperament. "But why do I feel that your plan seems to be a little impatient?" Colin sighed and nodded. "Yes, that's true. In fact, the best way for us is to continue wasting time with the Eastern people. Silvermoon City had enough surplus food, but the Eastern region people's escape route had been cut off by the Black Cavalry, so it was impossible for them to get supplies. As long as this stalemate continued for another 2 or 3 months, the people of the Eastern region would really fall into a dilemma. If we throw out the bait now, it may lead to a fierce counterattack from the Eastern region." "Then why did you?" Colin gestured for Queen Aisha to pour him another glass of wine. He frowned and said, "I'm worried about the northern frontier." "The northern frontier?" "Yes. I haven't received a letter from Ice Stone City for a long time. I suspect that the Eastern Army outside the city has blocked the news." "Why are you worried about the northern frontier?" "Because I gradually realized that my initial judgment of 2 things may have been a little wrong." "Which 2 things?" Colin drank another glass of deer blood wine and said, "The first thing is the mastermind behind Sith Savoy. At first, I thought that it was the Duke of St. Hilda who ordered him to kill Vera, but now I feel that the truth of the matter may not be so. Sith was introduced to me by Prince Okamoto, which means that the Savoy family is related to the trolls. Then, is it possible that the trolls were behind the assassination of Vera? They want to completely trigger the conflict between the northern frontier and the eastern region so that they can have a chance to breathe. The second thing is that black cavalry was ambushed in the Shadow Canyon. It seems that the Duke of St. Hilda is trying to eliminate the unstable elements in the northern frontier. But if you think about it carefully, there is a problem. How could the Duke of St. Hilda get the eastern region to cooperate with him to get rid of his brother? Wouldn't the eastern region be worried that this is a trap deliberately set by the St. Hilda brothers? So, you suspect that this series of events is a conspiracy of the trolls? It is indeed possible. But I also doubt that the trolls have the ability to complete such a grand plan. When did they have such a huge influence in the Radiant Empire? How can they mobilize so many forces to serve their plan? Maybe the trolls have other collaborators in the Radiant Empire. Yes. It is also possible that the Duke of St. Hilda is also involved. Although he is not the mastermind behind the scenes, I am afraid that he is one of the collaborators. After all, these two things are obviously beneficial to him. Then, what are you worried about? I am worried that the Duke of St. Hilda will accidentally cause trouble for himself and cause the already weakened northern frontier to fall into chaos again. So, we can't waste any more time with the eastern region. I want to end this war as soon as possible. Eastern Region Army Camp. Kathy felt uneasy in the face of Marquis Vincent's intense gaze. After a moment, she gritted her teeth and truthfully said, "Yes, sir, I was indeed sent by Viscount Angley." Marquis Vincent smiled proudly and praised himself for his wit. He then leaned back in his chair and asked, "What did he send you here for?" "He told me to tell you that there will be a rebellion at the south gate of Silvermoon City tonight." Chapter 153. The dark winter night was cold and silent. Silver Moon City was like a gigantic beast, quietly crawling under the dark night sky. The Eastern Army outside the city was constantly mobilizing, gathering almost all the soldiers outside the south gate. This kind of movement naturally couldn't be hidden from the half-elves in the city. Of course, Marquis Vincent didn't intend to hide it. At this point, the two sides had completely laid their cards on the table. Colin had dug a hole and provoked, "Come on in." Marquis Vincent's response was, "Come on in then." Colin was worried about his hometown in the northern frontier, so he didn't want to continue wasting time. Marquis Vincent simply couldn't afford to waste time. With this kind of tacit understanding, the two sides finally prepared to meet force with force in a duel. Of course, overall, the situation was more favorable to the half-elves. But the Eastern Army had no choice but to fight. They didn't have a better choice, having a city gate was better than climbing the wall. Of course, Marquis Vincent knew that there would be a large number of soldiers stationed at the south gate. Furthermore, the black guards that were wandering around could attack from behind at any moment. But he was still willing to give it a try. The black cavalry certainly wouldn't choose to fight at night. The darkness would seriously weaken their fighting strength. So, as long as they broke through the blockade of the south gate before dawn, the Sky Horse Legion would be able to capture Silvermoon City and turn defeat into victory. The moonlight was cold and the atmosphere gradually became oppressive. Near midnight, the south gate of Silvermoon City finally burst into flames, followed by a burst of battle cries. Not long after, the stones blocking the gate were moved away little by little, revealing a dark and gloomy gate. It was unknown whether it led to hell or heaven. Marquis Vincent's eyes instantly became incomparably fierce as he loudly ordered, "Pass the order of our army, attack the city." Woo! The bugle sounded, and the sleeping earth seemed to wake up in an instant. Countless soldiers of the Eastern Army shouted their slogans and rushed to the south gate. The final battle had officially drawn the curtain. As expected, the soldiers of the Eastern region who had just rushed into the city immediately ran into the half-elven army that was waiting for them. Countless arrows fell like a rainstorm, turning the narrow corridor into a meat grinder, constantly strangling the Eastern Army's forces. However, as soon as their comrades in the front fell, the soldiers of the eastern region rushed forward again. They were like tireless, fearless beasts, crazily rushing toward the half-elves' position. At the same time, the soldiers of the eastern region outside the city were still setting up ladders on the southern wall, trying to send more troops into the city. But at the top of the city wall, they suffered a stubborn counterattack from the half-elves. Colin's strategy was to only leave the eastern gate as the entrance to the city. This way, he could control the number of troops the other side sent into the city, so that the gnomes wouldn't be able to deal with it. As for the south city wall, it could not be lost yet. At the very least, it couldn't be lost so early. Queen Aisha also understood that tonight's battle was the final battle, so she personally came to the south gate to boost the morale of the gnomes. Even Vera had followed him. She was hiding in the rear, constantly casting spells to kill the eastern army that was rushing in from the south gate. At this time, the corpses of the southern army had piled up into a small hill, so much so that the eastern army had to climb over the corpses of their comrades in order to rush into the enemy's position. The wanton flow of blood converged into a stream, showing the fragility and cheapness of life. Seeing that his men were still unable to break through the blockade of the South City Gate, Marquis Vincent became more and more anxious. He knew that in this battle, there was no way out. Therefore, the Marquis of the Eastern region ignored his men's dissuasion and personally led his guards to rush into the South City Gate. Marquis Vincent's personal appearance greatly boosted the morale of the Pegasus Legion. After all, he was the eldest son of the House of Saint Prospero and the future lord of the Eastern region. Such identity and reputation was enough to make countless soldiers of the Eastern region die for him. The pressure on the gnomes suddenly increased. Finally, after more than 3 hours of bloody battle, the Eastern army finally completely occupied the South City Gate. But for this, they also paid an unimaginable number of casualties. The South City Gate was lost, and soon, the South City Wall gradually fell into the control of the Eastern Army. However, the battle was still not over. Next, there was a more dangerous and cruel street battle. The half-elves turned the familiar streets of Silvermoon City into a place filled with deadly dangers. Inside the wooden houses, spears were constantly thrusting out, stabbing the soldiers of the Eastern region to the ground. Arrows were shot from various hidden corners, making it impossible for the Eastern Army to guard against. The Eastern Army, who were still immersed in the joy of occupying the South City Gate, suddenly suffered a blow. The tenacity of the gnomes calmed them down, and they gradually realized that if they really wanted to occupy the city, they would have to pay a more tragic price. At this time, Marquis Vincent was already standing on the tower of the South City Gate. The battle just now had left him covered in blood, and there were several gaps in his armor. Obviously, he was injured. But at this time, he didn't care about these things. Marquis Vincent summoned a messenger and ordered, "Tell the soldiers not to be too entangled with the defenders, quickly pass through the South City area, and capture the half-elven palace as soon as possible." Yes. In addition, inform the camp outside the city to mobilize another 10,000 people into the city. Yes. But at this time, Viscount Orsten quickly dissuaded, "Sir Marquis, the army outside the city can't be moved lightly. Don't forget, the Black Cavalry still hasn't appeared." Marquis Vincent's eyes seemed to be on fire, and he fiercely said, "Of course I know the Black Cavalry hasn't moved. But as long as we occupy the palace first, and capture Queen Aisha, Viscount Angley, and the others, the Black Cavalry will naturally surrender without a fight." Viscount Orsten's mouth moved, and he wanted to persuade him again, but he saw Marquis Vincent's cold gaze suddenly turn towards him, and he ordered, "Viscount Orsten, I give you until dawn to lead the army to occupy the palace. If you can't complete the mission, don't come back to see me." "Yes." Viscount Orsten's expression was gloomy, and he could only accept the order and leave. Marquis Vincent stood on the city wall of Silvermoon City, looking at the pitch-black night sky outside the city, and muttered to himself, "Viscount Angley, how long are your Black Cavalry going to hide?" At the same time, Colin was standing on the palace wall, looking at the flames and screams in the South City area, but his heart was extremely cold. This time, in order to quickly finish off the Pegasus army, his plan had indeed caused the gnomes to suffer heavy casualties. But he didn't regret it. This was a battlefield of life and death, and there was no room for too much benevolence. Moreover, the gnomes indeed needed such a bloody battle to rise from the ashes. At most, Colin would compensate this race in the future. Of course, this was on the premise that this race would continue to follow his footsteps and fight for him. Looking away, Colin no longer paid attention to the battle in Silvermoon City. Because the moment that would determine victory and defeat would come next. Whoosh! An Eastern Border soldier who had rushed near the palace raised his head in shock, and saw a black shadow spreading its huge bat wings, suddenly rising from the palace wall, and flying out of Silvermoon City. Just as he was in a daze, a sharp arrow suddenly shot out from a dark corner, piercing his throat. Huff! Huff! As he fell to the ground, the Eastern Border soldier was still thinking, was that figure an angel, or a devil? Chapter 154. No matter how long the darkness was, dawn would eventually come. There was no sun, no light of dawn. Silvermoon City's dawn was gloomy. The sky was overcast, as if it was about to snow. The air pressure was very low, so low that it made it hard for people to breathe. The soldiers of the eastern region who were feeling suffocated only wanted to find something to vent. And killing people was undoubtedly the best choice. Silvermoon City had already turned into a sea of blood and fire. Shouts and screams intertwined to create a scene of hell on earth. However, the massacre of the Eastern region soldiers had thoroughly aroused the anger that had been suppressed for a long time in the hearts of the half-elves. More and more civilians joined the battle, using all kinds of things that could not even be called weapons to resist the evil invaders. The battle in the half-elven palace was the most bitter. Countless crazy soldiers of the Eastern region climbed over the palace walls like ants and killed their way in. But the half-elven guards in the palace were still tenaciously fighting back, defending the last pure land in their hearts and protecting their queen. As time passed, Marquis Vincent became more and more anxious. He kept having the messenger pass on his orders to the front lines, and also kept transferring troops from outside the city into the city, trying to completely break through the last obstacle in front of him. What's wrong with Austin? Why hasn't the palace been taken yet? Lord Marquis, Austin Viscount said that the resistance of the half-elves in the palace is very fierce. Moreover, our troops in the city are also constantly being attacked, and more soldiers are dying. Chi. Marquis Vincent chopped off the head of the herald with his sword. Then, with bloodshot eyes, he ordered a retainer beside him, "Let's go. Take his head to Austin Viscount's and tell him that I'll give him 1 more hour. If he can't complete the mission on time, I'll kill him." Yes. The retainer picked up the bloody head and hurriedly walked down the city wall, heading towards the palace. At this time, Marquis Vincent suddenly felt a trace of cold air on his face. He raised his head to look, and didn't know when, but snowflakes were floating in the sky. At the same time, a sentry horseman staggered up the city wall and reported with a panicked expression, "Lord Marquis, cavalry, black cavalry has appeared." Marquis Vincent's expression changed abruptly as he turned his head to look outside Silvermoon City. The sky to the south of the city was already covered by billowing smoke and dust. Then, the earth began to tremble as if a group of ancient giant beasts were charging towards them. Shock and fear instantly drowned Marquis Vincent's reason. The sword of Damocles hanging above his head finally slashed down. "Lord Marquis! Lord Marquis!" Seeing Marquis Vincent standing there in a daze, the sentinel couldn't help but remind him. Only then did Marquis Vincent come back to his senses. He forced himself to calm the panic in his heart and immediately ordered, "Pass down the order outside the city. Get into formation and prepare for battle." Yes. In fact, in order to prevent the Black Cavalry from attacking from behind, the Sky Horse Legion did not put all of their forces into this siege. At least half of their forces were left outside the city. Of course, when Marquis Vincent saw that the palace could not be taken down after a long time, he transferred some troops from outside the city into the city. But at this time, there were at least 20,000 Eastern troops outside the city. Under Marquis Vincent's military order, they immediately formed a dense spear formation and raised a huge shield, ready to meet the Black Cavalry's attack. Along with the earth-shattering sound of hooves, the densely packed Black Cavalry formation was like a moving wall, quickly covering the field of vision of the Eastern troops. In an instant, all the sound in the world disappeared, leaving only a neat note. On the city wall of Silver Moon City, Marquis Vincent's face instantly turned pale. The Marquis of the Eastern Border, who had bet all his wealth on Colin, couldn't help but regret it. After successfully annihilating the Black Cavalry's main force in the Shadow Canyon, Marquis Vincent had been very proud of himself for a while. It was inevitable that he felt that the heroes of the world were nothing more than this. It wasn't until now, when he really faced the Black Cavalry's charge, that he understood how terrifying this invincible army of the northern frontier was. The galloping warhorses caused the earth to shake. The thunder-like sound of horse hooves struck everyone's hearts, making it hard for them to breathe. Those who hadn't seen this scene with their own eyes would never be able to imagine what kind of terrifying momentum the elite cavalry of the Black Cavalry had when they charged. Looking down from the top of the city wall, it was like a black flood that had broken through a dam, surging forward with an unstoppable momentum. At this time, Colin was at the head of this black torrent. In a trance, he seemed to have returned to half a year ago, when he followed Marquis Garcia and led 3,000 heavy cavalry to break through the Troll Army's formation on the sky ice field. This kind of indomitable and invincible feeling was the same as before. The only difference was that the Black Cavalry now belonged to his army. Bow! Bow! The officers of the Eastern Army shouted at the top of their lungs. With the sound of bowstrings buzzing, black arrows rose from the Eastern Army's formation into the sky, mixed with a scalp-numbing whizzing sound, and fell into the ranks of the Black Cavalry. However, the front row of the Black Cavalry was full of heavy cavalry wearing full-body armor. These 500 heavy cavalry soldiers were like a steel shield, blocking all the incoming arrows. After 2 rounds of arrow rain, the vanguard of the Black Cavalry had arrived at a distance of about 100 steps in front of the Eastern Army. In the next moment, the most visually impactful scene of this battle was about to unfold. Colin tightly clamped his lance under his right arm, took a deep breath, and held his breath to welcome the upcoming collision. Bang! A loud noise, even overshadowed the rumbling of the horses' hooves. The vanguard of the Black Cavalry finally crashed into the Eastern Army's formation. At this moment, shields were broken and spears were broken. Countless lives disappeared like fireworks. Blood was like cheap dye, wantonly sprinkled. Screams and the sound of bones breaking were endless. In this cruel and bloody scene, the terrible impact of the cavalry was suddenly revealed. The neat shield wall, at the moment of collision, was smashed into pieces, creating numerous gaps. The light cavalry in the rear didn't waste the blood and lives of the heavy cavalry in front of them. They almost stepped on the bodies of the enemy and their comrades, swarming in from all the gaps, constantly rushing toward the Eastern Army. Marquis Vincent, on the city wall, had closed his eyes in pain. The moment the shield wall in front of the Eastern Army was broken, the outcome of this battle was already determined. At this time, he really understood why his father was so afraid of the Army of the North. This Black Guard, born from years of bloody battles with the Troll Empire, was not something that the Eastern Army, which had been at peace for a long time, could contend against. When he opened his eyes again, Marquis Vincent saw a northern frontier knight covered in blood, cutting off the pure white Pegasus flag of the House of St. Prospero. The situation was hopeless. Chapter 155. Snowflakes fluttered down, but they still couldn't cover up the bloody scene. The south gate of Silvermoon City had turned into a slaughterhouse. The Eastern Army had completely collapsed. The horsemen swept through like a tide, drowning the Eastern Army in an instant. Under the wave of steel swords, the Eastern army became helpless lambs, waiting to be slaughtered. Put down your weapons and kneel. Put down your weapons and kneel. The soldiers of the eastern region, who had nowhere else to go, dropped their weapons and knelt down to surrender when they heard the Black Guard's shouts. Unfortunately, they didn't know that Colin had already promised Knight Roger that he wouldn't let anyone from the Skyhorse Legion go. The blood of the Black Cavalry in the Shadow Canyon could only be repaid with the blood of the Skyhorse Legion. Thump! 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 Colin climbed to the top of the city wall and arrived in front of Marquis Vincent, who was surrounded by the northern frontier soldiers. Colin Angeli. Come, if you have the guts, then duel with me. Marquis Vincent waved the sword in his hand, his face filled with madness. Duel with me? Colin smiled disdainfully, you're just a defeated general. You think you're worthy? What did you say? Marquis Vincent instantly exploded, I'm not worthy. Ha, I'm not worthy. Who do you think you are? I'm the eldest son of the House of St. Prospero. You're just the son of a baron from the countryside. How dare you say I'm not worthy? Colin's expression didn't change in the face of humiliation. The barking of the loser was just a useless venting in the eyes of the winner. Yes. Honorable eldest son of the House of St. Prospero, how could you lose to the son of a baron from the countryside? If I were you, I would have slit my throat and killed myself to avoid tarnishing the honor of the Paladin family. Ah, I'll kill you. Marquis Vincent roared and was about to charge at Colin. Knight Roger immediately stepped forward and stopped him, shouting, You don't have the right to challenge Viscount Angeli to a duel. I'll fight you. Who do you think you are? Marquis Vincent was in a frenzy. He kept swinging his sword, trying to cut Roger into pieces. However, his mind was already in a mess, and his fighting style was completely out of order. Knight Roger easily suppressed him. Colin lost interest after a while. Both Knight Roger and Marquis Vincent were at the fourth step, but Marquis Vincent's mentality had already collapsed. Coupled with the fact that he was already injured when he led his army to attack the south gate, he was no match for Knight Roger at all. Colin casually watched this duel without any suspense while listening to his subordinates report the preliminary statistics of this battle. Although the Black Cavalry had obtained a complete victory in this battle, they had also paid a heavy price. Of the 8,000 Black Cavalry that had escaped from the Dark Shadow Canyon, only 6,000 remained. However, they had successfully defeated more than 20,000 soldiers of the Eastern Army. If they were to include the 40,000 soldiers led by Austin Viscounts, that would be a total of 60,000 soldiers. In addition, the Eastern Army in Silvery Moon City had already become a turtle in a jar. They wouldn't be able to jump around for long. It could be said that the Eastern House of St. Prospero's Pegasus Legion was completely buried in the half-elven kingdom. Just as Colin finished listening to the battle report, Marquis Vincent had already been defeated. Knight Roger's longsword was pressed against Marquis Vincent's throat. He turned to Colin and asked, Sir Viscounts, how should we deal with him? Please instruct me. Colin touched his chin and said, We can't kill him yet. We need to use him to redeem Marquis Garcia. Yes. Knight Roger nodded and immediately called his retainers to take away all of Marquis Vincent's weapons and armor. They also used thick iron chains to bind his hands and feet. Seeing this, Colin nodded with satisfaction. He stood up and said, Let's go. It's time to end this battle. At this time, the battle in Silvery Moon City was still going on. The streets and alleys were filled with killing scenes, especially in the half-elven palace. Viscount Austin was still desperately commanding the Eastern Army to attack the palace. However, when the Eastern Army outside the city was defeated and the news of Marquis Vincent being captured spread, the Eastern Army in Silvery Moon City immediately lost their will to fight. They dropped their weapons and knelt down to surrender. Colin seemed to want to deliberately humiliate Marquis Vincent. He tied him to a cross and dragged him behind a horse all the way from the south gate to the palace. When the half-elves along the way saw the sorry state of the Eastern Marquis, they began to curse him. Some of them were even bold enough to pick up stones from the roadside and throw them at Marquis Vincent. Of course, Colin wouldn't stop the actions of the half-elves. He wanted the hatred between Silverymoon City and the Eastern Army to deepen. Seeing that Colin didn't stop them, more and more half-elves began to throw stones at Marquis Vincent. The poor Marquis Vincent had never been humiliated like this before. He was so angry that he fainted. When they arrived at Half-Elven Palace, Queen Aisha was already waiting at the palace gate to greet them. Colin dismounted from his horse and had his men wake Marquis Vincent up. He then dragged the Eastern Marquis like a dead dog to Queen Aisha. Colin bowed with a hand on his chest and said loudly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Under your wise leadership, the Half-Elven army has successfully defeated the Eastern Army's Heavenly Horse Legion." Queen Aisha smiled and said loudly, "This glory is also due to your contribution and the thousands of brave and fearless Half-Elven soldiers. I'm proud of you." Then she looked at Marquis Vincent with cold eyes. "Marquis Vincent, you disregarded the friendship between the two countries and brazenly killed countless half-elves. This is unforgivable. In the name of the Half-Elven Queen, I ask you to go to the Half-Elven Kingdom cemetery and repent for your crimes." Marquis Vincent's face was full of disdain. He was about to curse, but Colin was quick and directly punched him in the face. "Marquis Vincent is of course very willing to repent for his crimes," he replied on behalf of Marquis Vincent. Marquis Vincent, with his mouth full of blood, groaned a few times on the ground. It seemed that he had agreed. The half-elven nobles were frightened. At the same time, they realized that from now on, the half-elven kingdom could only rely on the northern frontier. Queen Aisha didn't care about offending the Eastern Army. She didn't even look at the distressed Marquis Vincent. Instead, she walked towards the half-elven army gathered in front of the palace. It was time for show. Oh no, it was time for sympathy. Snowflakes fell on Queen Aisha's hair and shoulders, as if she was wearing a holy coat. With this great victory, Queen Aisha's prestige in the half-elven kingdom had reached an unprecedented level. As she approached step by step, the half-elves gathered outside the palace kept cheering. The boiling momentum seemed to melt all the snow in the sky. From today on, the half-elven race finally got rid of their previous image of being weak and cowardly. Chapter 156. The heavy snow changed the color of the sky. Amidst the heavy snow, a team of about 300 people was advancing towards Silvermoon City. 8 knights in red armor held the flag of the Scarlet Flame of Purification and rode at the front of the team. When the half-elves saw this flag, they were so scared that they quickly knelt down and saluted. This was because the Scarlet Flame of Purification was the insignia of the Empire of Light. In a luxurious carriage in the middle of the team, a boy of about 13 or 14 years old was reading a report that had just been sent in by an attendant with a look of surprise on his face. From the style of his clothes and the insignia on his chest, it was not difficult to guess that this young boy was the Crown Prince of the Empire, His Highness Harrison San Lorenzo. "Mother, the Eastern Border's Pegasus army was actually wiped out in front of Silvermoon City." Empress Medela was lying lazily on a soft couch with a thick fox fur coat covering her body. When she heard her son's question, she didn't even open her eyes. The Eastern Border hasn't been at war for so many years. Has the army become so weak? They actually lost to the half-elves. There's also the Black Cavalry. The Black Cavalry? Yes, it should be the remnants of the army that escaped from the Shadow Canyon. According to the report, there are 8,000 of them. Only then did Empress Medela open her eyes, revealing a curious expression. Prince Harrison hurriedly passed the report over and asked doubtfully, "Mother, why didn't the remnants of the Black Cavalry escape back to the northern frontier? Instead, they went to Silvermoon City." "Because their mission is to protect Vera, and Vera is still in Silvermoon City." Empress Medela casually gave a reason, but her eyes were fixed on Viscount Angley's name in the report. It was unknown what she had thought of, but a strange smile suddenly appeared on the Empress' face. Prince Harrison seemed to believe this reason. After hesitating for a moment, he asked again, "Mother, the Duke of St. Hilda, the Duke of St. Prospero, and the half-elven royal family, they should all be father's vassals, right?" "Yes." "Then, should we stop them from fighting each other like this?" Hearing this, Empress Medela looked into her son's eyes and asked with a smile, "Do you wish for the vassals of the San Lorenzo family to live in harmony and get along well with each other?" "Shouldn't I?" Prince Harrison's eyes were filled with doubt. "Harrison, do you think the San Lorenzo family is strong enough to defeat the northern frontier?" "It should be fine." "What about the northern frontier and the eastern frontier?" Prince Harrison hesitated, not daring to make any assertions. "What about the western region, or even the southern region?" Empress Medela's eyes were cold. "Tell me, if the dukes of the four territories join forces, how will the San Lorenzo family deal with them?" Prince Harrison suddenly broke out in a cold sweat and fell silent. However, Queen Medela didn't seem to want to let her son go so easily. She stared into his eyes, waiting for his answer. After a while, Prince Harrison answered carefully, "Mother, aren't you the sister of the Duke of St. Hilda? I also have the blood of the House of St. Hilda in me. The northern frontier shouldn't rebel against the royal family, right? Ha, isn't there a lot of intermarriage between the Holy Knight families in the empire? If marriage could solve all political problems, then there wouldn't be any wars in this world. A wise lord would only consider benefits when deciding the family's position, not how many women he married." Prince Harrison's mouth was agape, and he was dumbfounded. He really wanted to ask his mother, if one day the northern frontier really stood against the royal family, which side would she side with? However, after hesitating for a moment, he still didn't have the courage to ask such a question. After some thought, Prince Harrison said, "Isn't there still the Holy Covenant? Would the dukes of the four territories dare to break the agreement, go back on their word, and challenge the San Lorenzo family's position?" Queen Medela laughed coldly. "Harrison, remember, all verbal promises and paper agreements can be betrayed at any time. If you want to ensure the loyalty of your vassals, you can only rely on your own strength." Prince Harrison nodded with some difficulty. "I understand, Mother. That's why we can't let the dukes of the four territories unite. We have to make them conflict with each other. Only then can the San Lorenzo family maintain control of the empire." Queen Medela smiled with relief. She reached out to stroke her son's hair and nodded. "That's right. You have to remember, the San Lorenzo family's supreme position is guaranteed by the four territories being in balance and restricting each other." Prince Harrison nodded heavily, committing his mother's words to memory. He then asked, "Then, what about the half-elven kingdom? How should we treat such a subordinate country? There's no need to spend too much effort on such a small country." Queen Medela's expression was clearly much more casual. However, from this battle, the half-elven army seems to have some redeeming qualities. It's worth roping them in. Then should I still follow the original plan and crown Queen Aisha? Queen Medela looked at her son with interest. "Do you have any other ideas?" Seeing his mother's encouraging gaze, Prince Harrison mustered up his courage. "I feel that even though the House of Medea claims to have voluntarily given up the throne to the Miller family, there's no lack of coercion and threats involved. If I crown a usurper like Aisha Miller, wouldn't that give more ambitious people in the empire hope? That's why I think we should dethrone Queen Aisha and put the House of Medea back on the throne. This way, the House of Medea will have to follow the San Lorenzo family closely, whether out of gratitude or for support." "You make a lot of sense." Queen Medela nodded approvingly. Prince Harrison had just smiled when he heard his mother continue, "But do you know the consequences of refusing to crown Aisha Miller?" "What is it?" "It's the hatred of the half-elves and the dissatisfaction of the northern frontier. If it's more serious, you might not even be able to leave Silvery Moon in one piece." Prince Harrison's smile froze. He said in a small voice, "It can't be, that's serious, right? Queen Medella's expression was abnormally serious. Harrison, you have to know that without the support of the corresponding strength, it's just a joke. You want to dethrone Queen Aisha? But have you thought about how high her position in the half-elves' hearts will be after this great victory? If you do this, won't the half-elves resent you? You want to restore the House of Medea. But without the support of strength and fame, do you think you can win the loyalty of tens of millions of half-elves with just one sentence? And the northern frontier, will they be willing to watch you take away the half-elven kingdom that they paid a great price to control? Are you going to rely on the 300 guards outside to change the situation of the half-elven kingdom? Hearing his mother's questions, Prince Harrison was sweating profusely. The young prince was clearly frightened by the dangers involved in political struggles. Seeing this, Empress Medella sighed softly and pulled her young son into her arms. She comforted him. Harrison, you still have a lot to learn, but before that, you must remember to speak less and do less, and observe more. Young lions must learn to hide their fangs and claws, because that won't scare the enemy away. It will only arouse fear and vigilance. Yes, mother. I will obediently crown Queen Aisha. Prince Harrison buried his head in his mother's arms and said in a muffled voice. Okay. Queen Medella rubbed her son's hair and reminded, also, you have to pay attention to the northern frontier's Viscount Angli. Why? Because he's now the true master of the half-elven kingdom. Prince Harrison looked up in confusion, but saw that his mother had no intention of explaining further. Instead, she stared at the last sentence in a daze. That sentence was shockingly Queen Aisha is pregnant. Chapter 157. Sparkling and translucent water droplets slid down from the bright red lychees, and a sweet taste floated in the air. Although it was winter, the half-elves were proud of their planting techniques, which allowed the out-of-season fruit like lychees to appear in the palace. Colin was sitting high on the half-elven throne, enjoying himself as Queen Aisha fed him a peeled lychee. A beauty in his arms, a soft and fragrant voice, and a sweet lychee. Colin had to admit that the land of warmth and tenderness was truly a hero's grave. It was no wonder that so many ambitious and ruthless people who used to call the wind and summon the rain had their dreams and aspirations erased by their luxurious and corrupt lives. Your Majesty, the Viscounts of Austin has arrived, the attendant reported in the hall. Queen Aisha got up from Colin's arms, elegantly tidying up her half-opened clothes, then ordered in a calm and natural tone, "Bring him in." Colin also stood up from the throne and walked down the platform. 2 guards happened to be escorting the Viscounts of Austin in from outside the hall. "All right, you may leave." The guards obeyed the order and left the hall, leaving the Viscounts of Austin behind, carefully bowing to Queen Aisha and Colin. The once high-spirited Viscounts of the eastern region was now in an extremely sorry state. Colin approached the Viscounts of Austin and greeted him with a smile. "Your Excellency Viscounts, are you satisfied with the hospitality of the past few days?" "Satisfied, satisfied. Her Majesty's hospitality to me is impeccable." Colin smelled the sour stench of the other party's body from not bathing for many days, so he quickly took a few steps back and distanced himself. "It's good that you're satisfied. I called you here today to ask you a few questions. If you answer them well, Her Majesty will consider letting you return to the eastern region." A hint of joy appeared on the Viscounts of Austin's face, and he nodded repeatedly. "Please ask." "I'll definitely tell you the truth." "Who revealed the whereabouts of the Black Cavalry to you?" "This. I'm not sure either." "It's true, Master Angeli. I'm not trying to lie to you. It was the Duke of St. Prospero who ordered us to set up the ambush in the Shadow Valley. Let alone me, I'm afraid even Marquis Vincent doesn't know the whole story." Viscount Orston looked troubled, as though he was worried that he wouldn't be able to answer the first question and that the other party would think that he was deliberately being uncooperative. However, Wizard Cusius also accompanied us to the Dark Shadow Canyon. He is the vice-chairman of the Yule Council and a powerful 6th-level wizard. Therefore, I suspect that the battle at Shadow Canyon was instigated by the Yevil Council. Colin immediately frowned. He didn't expect another mage force to be involved. This seemed to make the current situation even more complicated. However, Colin always felt that the Yevil Council might be involved in this incident, but they were definitely not the mastermind behind it. The nobles of the Empire had always been wary and repulsed by the mages. There was no way they would allow themselves to be led by the nose. However, looking at Viscount Orsten's expression, he probably wouldn't be able to get any more useful information out of him. Thus, Colin changed the topic. When you surrounded Silvermoon City, did you intercept any carrier pigeons from the northern frontier? This time, Viscount Orsten nodded decisively, yes. Moreover, they came from Ice Stone City. Colin's spirits lifted as he hurriedly asked, where's the letter? The letter. I don't know where it went. Viscount Orsten was troubled again, but he quickly said, I remember the general content of the letter. I can repeat it to you. Speak. All right. The letter mentioned a total of 3 things. The first was about the Duke of St. Hilda. The letter said that half a month ago, the northern prince of the Troll Empire, His Highness Paladin Otto Valkin, suddenly appeared in Coldwinter City and issued a duel invitation to the Duke of St. Hilda. The Duke of St. Hilda immediately accepted the challenge. The two of them fought until the sky darkened and the earth darkened. In the end, they fought to a draw. A draw? Colin exclaimed, you mean, the Duke of St. Hilda is actually a paladin? I'm afraid so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to force Paladin Otto to retreat. Colin didn't expect the first piece of news in the letter to be so explosive. Only now did he understand why Marquis Garcia had been holding back after being betrayed by his brother. Originally, he thought that Marquis Garcia didn't want the House of St. Hilda to be embroiled in internal strife. However, it seemed that he knew his brother's trump card. This also explained why the Duke of St. Hilda dared to marry Vera to the half-elf kingdom in an attempt to encroach on the eastern region despite the internal instability of the House of St. Hilda. Suppressing the shock in his heart, Colin motioned for the Viscounts to continue. The second thing is that the northern frontier suffered from a lack of food harvest this year. There have been slave rebellions everywhere, and they are getting more and more intense. The Duke of St. Hilda ordered the Golden Lion Legion to send troops to suppress them. The last thing is that your Viscounts also suffered from a lack of food, which also caused several rebellions. Fortunately, they were all suppressed in time, and the current situation is still stable. After listening to the 3 pieces of news in the letter from Ice Stone City, Colin fell into deep thought for a moment. He now felt that there was a pair of mysterious hands manipulating everything behind the scenes. His previous doubts couldn't help but resurface. Who poisoned Marquis Adams in the Lion's Roar Castle? Who ordered Cit Savoy to assassinate Vera? Who instigated the Eastern region to send troops to ambush the Black Cavalry in the Shadow Canyon? Who arranged for Paladin Prince Otto to challenge the Duke of St. Hilda? And it just so happened to be during the time of the rebellion on the northern frontier. Thinking about it carefully, even the slave rebellion on the northern frontier was instigated and induced by someone. If the Duke of St. Hilda hadn't purposely hidden his strength, he would have died in the duel with Paladin Otto, and the northern frontier would have fallen into chaos without a leader. Considering that the Black Cavalry was ambushed in the Shadow Canyon, the most stable military pillar of the northern frontier had collapsed. From this, it could be deduced that the true goal of the mysterious person behind the scenes was to cause the northern frontier to fall into chaos. Thinking of this, Colin couldn't help but think of Count Oman's gloomy face. When the trolls invaded, Colin had suspected that this guy's plan to lure the enemy to the Duke of St. Hilda harbored evil intentions. Could it be that this time, it was Count Oman who planned all of this behind the scenes? Colin's silence made the Viscounts Austen uneasy. After a while, he carefully asked, Lord Viscounts, do you have any other questions? Colin came back to his senses and shook his head. That's all. All right, I will release you back to the Eastern Territory as promised, as long as you can pass a message to the Duke of St. Prospero. Please tell me. Tell the Duke of St. Prospero that if he wants to redeem his son, he can use Marquis Garcia in exchange. All right, I will definitely pass on your message. Waving his hand, Colin indicated for the Viscount's Austen to leave. Queen Aisha saw Colin deep in thought and seemed to realize something. She slowly walked to Colin's side and asked softly, "Are you leaving?" Colin nodded. "Yes, I must return to Ice Stone City as soon as possible. I'm afraid that the northern frontier is about to fall into chaos." Queen Aisha didn't try to persuade him. She only threw herself into Colin's embrace and said softly, "If you need any help, please let me know." Feeling the soft body in his arms and the fragrance that surrounded the tip of his nose, Colin smiled and said, "I do need your help." Chapter 158. The snow finally stopped. The sun showed its long-lost face, illuminating this world covered in silver. South of Silvermoon City, a large number of Eastern captives were working hard under the supervision of the Black Cavalry. A luxurious convoy passed by them, and many of the captives looked up curiously. Then they were shocked by the emblem on the convoy's flag. It turned out to be the imperial family. Prince Harrison lifted the curtains and looked out for a while. Then, he asked curiously, "Mother, why did they dig such a big hole?" Hearing this, Empress Medela glanced at the scene outside the carriage and sneered, "That's not a pit, it's their grave." Grave? Prince Harrison didn't understand for a moment. But soon he understood what his mother meant, and his little face turned pale with fright. The curtain fell, separating the inside and outside of the carriage into two worlds. "What, are you afraid?" Empress Medela lifted the curtain again, leaving her young son with nowhere to hide from the cruel truth. I'm just a little shocked." Prince Harrison tried to explain. "There's nothing to be shocked about. The cruelty of this game lies in this. The winner takes everything, and the loser dies in the grave they dug with their own hands." Prince Harrison calmed down and asked hesitantly, "Forgiveness and mercy, aren't they virtues?" "Yes." Empress Medela nodded, but then she immediately shook her head, "But a qualified lord will only forgive and show mercy to those who submit to him. The Pegasus Legion won't submit to the half-elves or the northern frontier, so they can only die. What's more, there's the blood debt of the Black Cavalry. In this case, if Viscount Angley is soft-hearted towards these eastern captives, then he won't be able to win the loyalty of the Black Cavalry." Prince Harrison shrank back, feeling more and more that this world was abnormally terrifying. Looking at the sweating Eastern captives outside the carriage, Prince Harrison was puzzled. Then why don't these Eastern captives resist? Because they don't know anything about their own fate. Empress Medela sneered, "In fact, how many people know whether or not their current actions are digging a grave for themselves in the future?" Dong dong. There was a knock on the door and a San Lorenzo family knight's voice sounded, "Your Majesty, the Half-Elf Kingdom's welcoming team is already in front." "I understand." Queen Medela lowered the curtain and ruffled Prince Harrison's hair. "No need to pity the losers. As the eldest son of the San Lorenzo family, you should pay more attention to the victors, appease them, rope them in, and win their support." "Yes, Mother." Prince Harrison nodded and adjusted his expression, revealing an innocent smile that a young boy of his age should have. The royal convoy soon arrived at the south gate of Silvermoon City. Amidst the melodious music, Queen Aisha personally stood at the front of the welcoming party. Behind her, Vera and Colin were standing on her left and right respectively. Behind them were a group of half-elf nobles. Under the warm winter sun, the 8 knights of the San Lorenzo family stopped their horses at almost the same time and stuck the flags in their hands into the ground. Woo! With the sound of a horn, the door of the luxurious carriage in the middle of the convoy slowly opened. Empress Medela and Prince Harrison walked out one after the other. Queen Aisha took a few steps forward and bowed in a standard palace manner. Your Majesty the Queen, Your Highness the Prince, please allow me to welcome you to Silvermoon City on behalf of the half-elves. Your arrival is a grace to the half-elves, and also a supreme honor for Silvermoon City. Prince Harrison stepped forward slightly cautiously and bowed back. He said in a childish tone, "Beautiful Madam Aisha, thank you for welcoming me." Because the coronation ceremony had not yet taken place, Prince Harrison could not address Aisha as Her Majesty in public, even if she was now the half-elf queen. After that, Prince Harrison looked at Vera, who was behind Queen Aisha, and greeted her in a more cordial tone. "Cousin Vera, I am very happy to see you here." "Your Highness Harrison, I am also very happy to see you here." Vera smiled sweetly. She seemed to like this cute cousin of hers very much. Prince Harrison then turned to look at Colin with undisguised admiration on his little face. "Your Excellency Viscount Angley, I heard from my mother that your riding skills are the best in the northern frontier. If you have time, can you teach me?" Colin blinked and was speechless. When did my riding skills become so good? Why didn't I know about it? However, he certainly could not reject Prince Harrison's request in public. He could only smile and say, "Of course, Your Highness. It would be my honor." "All right, let's hurry into the city. I heard that Lady Aisha is pregnant. We can't let her wait in the cold for too long." Empress Medela smiled and stepped forward, interrupting everyone who was chatting. She then naturally took Queen Aisha's arm and led her to her carriage. "Harrison, go and catch up with your cousin Vera. Lady Aisha, you can take my carriage." "Okay, thank you, Your Highness." Colin looked at Empress Medela, who pulled Queen Aisha away without any explanation. He frowned slightly but did not say anything. The convoy set off again and set off for Silvermoon City. In the carriage exclusive to the royal family, Empress Medela and Queen Aisha sat opposite each other. They were like two beautiful roses that were competing to bloom, showing off their beauty to the fullest. Empress Medela looked at Queen Aisha's belly, which had not yet appeared, and suddenly smiled. "This is your first child, right?" "Yes." Queen Aisha lowered her head slightly, looking a little reserved. "Then you must be careful. It's easiest to miscarry in the first few months." The Empress' words stunned Queen Aisha. She was a little confused, but she still nodded. "Yes, thank you, Your Highness, for the reminder." "You're welcome. I'm also a woman, and a mother of 2 children. Naturally, I know how difficult it is to give birth to the next generation." Empress Medela's tone was full of concern. "Your Highness, you're not only a woman and a mother, but also a role model for all women in the empire." Queen Aisha always felt that the Empress' concern might have other intentions, so she was always vigilant. "How can I be considered a role model?" Empress Medela smiled. "When I was pregnant with Harrison, I actually rode around. One time, I accidentally fell off the horse and almost had a miscarriage. It scared me." Queen Aisha frowned. She did not understand why the Empress kept mentioning miscarriage. But when she heard what the Empress said next, she suddenly realized something. "Later, I found out that I fell off the horse because the saddle was tampered with." Empress Medela looked at Queen Aisha. "Do you know who did it? Maybe it's His Majesty's political enemy." "Yes. That's what everyone thinks. Moreover, the one who served as the knight that day was the son of the political enemy." Empress Medela sneered. "Then, His Majesty used this as a reason to strip the political enemy of his position in the palace." Queen Aisha was silent. She completely understood what Empress Medela wanted to say. "I heard that you just suffered an assassination not long ago." "Yes." Queen Aisha nodded. She wanted to explain that she had discussed this assassination with Colin, but she didn't say it out loud when the words were on the tip of her tongue. "Aisha." Empress Medela suddenly held Queen Aisha's hand and said in a concerned tone, "Don't be willing to be a man's chess piece, because a chess piece can be abandoned at any time." Queen Aisha bit her lip and looked up at Empress Medela. She sincerely asked for advice. Then, what should I do? Empress Medela smiled. You should firmly hold on to the things that you can truly rely on, such as the half-elven kingdom, such as the child in your belly. I understand. Queen Aisha nodded heavily. Empress Medela looked at Queen Aisha's slightly changed expression and smiled with satisfaction. Also, the San Lorenzo family will always be a strong backing for you. Thank you, Your Highness. I will always remember the grace of the San Lorenzo family. After a long while, Colin sighed and said with a smile, looks like Queen Medela's plan isn't very smart, because she doesn't know what kind of person you are. Then, what kind of person am I? Colin was about to answer when he felt something rubbing his calf under the round table. As soon as he raised his head, he saw Queen Elsa with a smile on her face. She was looking at him charmingly. Colin's heart couldn't help but skip a beat. He quickly reached out and grabbed the other's naughty little foot that was teasing him. The delicate and smooth feeling made Colin couldn't help but hold Queen Aisha's delicate and charming jade foot in his palm and gently knead it. Queen Aisha's fair cheeks blushed, and her watery eyes glanced at Colin flirtatiously. It was as if she was complaining about his presumptuousness, but also as if she was encouraging him to be bold. Just as Colin was about to lift the round table in front of him and further explore the seductive and mysterious flower path, a maid suddenly reported from outside the crystal greenhouse. Your Majesty, Prince Harrison and Miss Vera are outside asking for an audience. Colin suddenly felt a little depressed. If it were anyone else, he would definitely ask Queen Aisha to send them away, but these two were really difficult to deal with. Queen Elsa looked at the deflated Colin. She suddenly covered her mouth and giggled. She comforted him, I will prepare honey chrysanthemum tea tonight. Lord Viscount, do you want to have a taste? Of course, Colin wouldn't refuse. Okay. I must try the tea personally made by your Majesty and see what it tastes like. Queen Elsa giggled and withdrew her slender foot from Colin's evil hand. She said to the maid outside in a loud voice, let them in. Soon, Prince Harrison and Vera walked in. Today, Vera was wearing a long white dress that was slightly trailing on the ground. She also wore a white curly-brimmed hat. She looked dignified and elegant, like a blooming magnolia. As soon as the girl entered the greenhouse, she smiled sweetly at Colin. If there weren't other people in the greenhouse, she would have jumped straight into Colin's arms. After a while, Vera looked at the beautiful blood roses and couldn't help but praise, Your Majesty, the blood roses that you have cultivated are getting more and more beautiful. Queen Aisha smiled gently and said, Miss Vera, you are too kind. If you want to learn, I would be happy to teach you. Vera was a little tempted, but she was also a little hesitant. Queen Aisha seemed to see through Vera's inner struggle, and she comforted her, Don't worry, these flowers are cultivated with animal blood. Vera was relieved when she heard that there was no need for human blood or even human heads. She smiled and said, Okay, then I will have to trouble you. Prince Harrison, of course, had no interest in the flower cultivation technology. He approached Colin and asked in an admiring tone. Your Excellency Viscount Angley, can you tell me how you defeated the 100,000 soldiers of the Eastern Army with only 8,000 black cavalry soldiers? Colin lowered his head and looked at the eldest prince of the Empire of Light, but there was a trace of annoyance in his heart. After all, Queen Medela had tried to sow discord between him and Queen Elsa. Naturally, Colin hated Prince Harrison, and he didn't like him either. He had long regarded the half-elf kingdom as his own, so how could he allow others to try to intervene? Not even the imperial family of the empire. Of course, he would not show this disgust. He still had a kind smile on his face and said perfunctorily, Your Highness, it was the half-elf army that defeated the Eastern Army, not the black cavalry soldiers. That is also very powerful. Can you teach me how to command cavalry in battle? Prince Harrison had a pure and flawless smile on his face, but in Colin's eyes, it seemed a little fake. Colin rolled his eyes and suddenly had a good way to make the San Lorenzo family unhappy. Commanding cavalry in battle is just a small matter. Your Highness, as a prince of the Empire, you should learn more powerful things. Prince Harrison's eyes lit up, and he suddenly became interested. What more powerful things? You will know when you come with me. After that, Colin took Prince Harrison and said goodbye to Queen Aisha and Vera, and then left the crystal greenhouse. At most, it will only be enough for half of them. While the two were talking, the conflict outside the city had become more and more intense. The prisoners who had been hungry for a day poured their anger on the supervisors, thinking that they had embezzled the food. More and more people joined the fight. Blood was wantonly splashed on the snow, reflecting the light of the setting sun, creating a strange sense of beauty. Prince Harrison looked at the black cavalry soldiers who were watching from the side without any intention of stopping the quarrel. He wondered, Your Excellency Viscounts, why aren't your black cavalry soldiers stopping the riot of the captives? Colin, however, remained calm and unruffled as he asked, Why should I stop it? They are rebelling against your will. No, they are just rebelling against the supervisors. Even so, don't you care about the supervisors? Why should I care? Colin suddenly showed a strange smile. The supervisors themselves were selected from the captives. So, this is just the people of the eastern region killing each other. Prince Harrison was instantly stunned. He opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. Selecting supervisors from the captives would inevitably create a rift among the people of the eastern region. The captives who worked hard would definitely be jealous of their companions who were selected to be supervisors. This hatred would even surpass their hatred for the black cavalry. This was human nature. Then, Colin would deliberately give them less food. The captives would not resent the black cavalry because they did not dare. But they would transfer this resentment to their former companions, now the supervisors, thinking that these people were the real culprits who oppressed them. Once this hostility and jealousy broke out, the people of the eastern region would kill each other. There was no need for the black cavalry to do it himself. Prince Harrison suddenly felt that the Viscount Angley next to him was really scary. This method of playing with people's hearts was really terrifying. But, it was also very effective. The battle outside the city was coming to an end. Although the supervisors did not need to work, they were stronger and had some simple weapons in their hands. But the captives had the absolute advantage in numbers and soon won the battle. Thousands of supervisors' bodies were thrown on the snow, next to the bodies of the captives. Black cavalry did not care about this. As long as the people of the eastern region did not try to break out of the restricted area, they could do whatever they wanted. The captives cheered loudly to celebrate the victory, and then immediately rushed to the cauldrons full of food. However, there was still not enough food to go around. So, the fighting broke out again. Piles of corpses were added to the snow. When the chaos finally subsided, the black cavalry finally entered the scene. They directed the remaining captives to bury the corpses, and then selected a new batch of supervisors from among them. Then, the next cycle, Colin looked at Prince Harrison, whose face was constantly changing, and suddenly asked, Your Highness, look at those supervisors, what do they look like? Prince Harrison was stunned and puzzled. What do they look like? Do they look like human nobles? Nobles? Yes, the number of nobles is smaller, but they have more power. They enslave a large number of their companions, but they are not much different from us. Prince Harrison felt a chill in his heart, and found that Colin's words were indeed reasonable. For some reason, he suddenly felt an inexplicable panic in his heart, and blurted out, But in the real world, how could the commoners dare to rebel against the nobles? Under normal circumstances, of course they would not dare. Colin smiled and said, But when they are forced into a dead end, what can they not do? But even if they rebel, they can't win. The nobles in the real world are not like those supervisors. They are not something that the commoners can defeat with numbers. Colin did not refute this time. Instead, he sneered and said, "Your Highness, if you are obsessed with the question of whether the commoners can defeat the nobles, then you will fall into the trap of this game." Trap? What do you mean? Colin pointed in the direction of the huge pit outside the city, his eyes deep and dark. Think about it, who arranged this conflict between the supervisors and the captives, and who is constantly intensifying this conflict and making them kill each other? Prince Harrison's eyes narrowed. It's you. Colin laughed heartily. That's right. Then, think about it again. Between the overseer and the captive, do I really care who wins or loses? Prince Harrison was enlightened. You don't care. As long as they fight among themselves, no matter who wins or loses, they will have already fallen into your trap. What they should really do is to unite and rebel against the Black Cavalry, and against you. Yes. Colin nodded lightly, and then suddenly stopped talking. Prince Harrison pondered over this meaningful metaphor that Colin had mentioned, and seemed to have understood something. But suddenly, he was stunned. Because he thought of the two classes that the supervisors and the captives symbolized in the real world, the nobles and the commoners. However, there was another force in this game, Colin and the Black Cavalry. What they were symbolizing was, Prince Harrison suddenly turned to look at Colin, and saw this Viscount Angley give him an enigmatic smile. He opened his mouth, wanting to ask the question in his heart, but he realized that he did not know where to start. Suddenly, this prince of the empire felt a boundless fear envelop him, and he could not help but tremble. Chapter 161. The colorful glass reflected the charming light and shadows. The statues of the 7 first-generation holy knights stood on both sides of the palace, watching the people in the hall. The nobles of the Empire of Radiance who came to watch the ceremony gathered together with solemn expressions. In the melodious sound of the bell, Prince Harrison strode into the hall with his head held high. Cheers rose from all directions. His Holiness Pope Gregory was holding the crown that symbolized the supreme power of the empire. He was standing on the left side of the throne, quietly watching Prince Harrison. An extreme desire that came from the depths of his heart made Prince Harrison unable to help but slightly quicken his pace. Arriving in front of Pope Gregory, Prince Harrison knelt down on one knee, waiting for his own coronation. However, as time passed, Pope Gregory didn't place the crown on Prince Harrison's head. The hall suddenly quieted down. Prince Harrison raised his head in confusion, only to see Pope Gregory's emotionless eyes. "Your Highness." Prince Harrison called out softly. Pope Gregory finally spoke, but his tone was extremely cold. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. The Lord needs a new shepherd." Boom. Prince Harrison suddenly felt like he was struck by lightning. His whole body froze on the spot, not knowing what to do. The sound in his ears suddenly disappeared, and Pope Gregory's figure seemed to be getting farther and farther away. He suddenly reached out with both hands, trying to grab the crown, but it was empty. Pope Gregory's face also became blurry, and in the end, it turned into Colin Angeli's appearance. Prince Harrison opened his mouth to shout, but he found that he couldn't make a sound. At some point, a whip suddenly appeared in his hand. Prince Harrison lowered his head and found that his luxurious clothes had turned into a shabby military uniform. Moreover, it was the uniform of the Eastern Army's Heavenly Horse Legion. Prince Harrison suddenly turned around and found that he was surrounded by a group of emaciated Eastern Army soldiers. Their eyes flashed with the flames of anger, and they were approaching him step by step. "Why won't you give us food? Are you really nobler than us? What right do you have to enslave us?" Fear instantly shrouded Prince Harrison. He tried to put up a strong front and waved his whip, trying to scare off the Eastern Army soldiers in front of him. However, such a threat was of little use. Roaring, these Eastern border soldiers charged at Prince Harrison like a pack of wild beasts. "Ah!" Prince Harrison let out a cry of despair. Then, he realized that his body was falling rapidly. When he turned around, he saw an endless abyss of darkness behind him. Harrison, Harrison. Hearing his mother's voice, Prince Harrison finally woke up from his nightmare. He sat up abruptly and panted heavily. Only then did he realize that his body was drenched in cold sweat. Queen Medela wiped her son's pale face with a silk handkerchief and asked worriedly, "What's wrong?" "Nightmares?" Prince Harrison nodded. The fear in his eyes had yet to fade. "What nightmare scared you so much?" Prince Harrison hesitated for a moment before recounting his nightmare, as well as what Colin had said to him at the top of the city wall. After he finished speaking, Prince Harrison looked at Queen Medela, who was frowning, and asked anxiously, "What's the matter?" "Mother, are we nobles like those overseers outside Silvery Moon City? Just tools chosen by God to enslave our own kind?" Queen Medela wanted to refute, but for a moment, she found that she could not find a valid reason. After a moment of silence, she suddenly asked, "What do you think?" Prince Harrison struggled for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "I think, why does the Emperor of the San Lorenzo family have to accept the Pope's coronation?" Queen Medela sighed in her heart. She suddenly realized that Colin had succeeded. He had successfully provoked Prince Harrison's fear of the church. This should be the other party's revenge. When Queen Medela had tried to sow discord between Queen Aisha and Colin, Colin had returned the favor and successfully sowed discord between Prince Harrison and the church. Looking at her son's pale face and sharp eyes, Queen Medela suddenly felt a headache coming on. The struggle between theocracy and monarchy was nothing new in the history of the Empire of Light. But those emperors who had tried to challenge the authority of the church had all met with tragic ends. "Harrison, do you know? There was once an emperor of the San Lorenzo family who had the same idea as you. At his coronation ceremony, he did not invite the Pope, but had his own queen crown him instead." Prince Harrison's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly asked, "What happened after that?" "After that, the Pope issued an edict to depose the emperor of his church, and to remove his subjects from their oath of loyalty to him." Prince Harrison immediately became nervous. Could it be that because of the Pope's edict, the subjects of the empire were no longer willing to be loyal to the emperor? Yes, the dukes of the four territories declared at almost the same time that if the emperor could not obtain the Pope's forgiveness, they would no longer recognize him as the emperor. Prince Harrison's face instantly turned pale, and the light in his eyes disappeared. After a while, he opened his mouth again and asked in a small voice, "What happened after that?" The emperor, who had become the target of public criticism, had no choice but to beg for the Pope's forgiveness. On a snowy night, the emperor climbed the holy mountain barefooted and knelt in front of the Cathedral of Light for 3 days and 3 nights before he finally saw the Pope. The once proud emperor could only crawl before the Pope, spread his arms, his body in the shape of a cross, and repent for his crimes with tears and snot running down his face. The Pope used a thorny vine to whip the emperor 10 times on the back and sternly reprimanded the emperor for his crimes. After humiliating this queen consort of the mortal world, the Pope announced that he was pardoning the emperor of his crimes, restoring his church records, and agreeing to crown him. Hearing this, Prince Harrison couldn't help but tremble. The scene from his nightmare appeared before his eyes again, making him feel a suffocating fear. Empress Medela cupped her son's pale cheeks with both hands and forced him to look into her eyes. "So, Harrison, before you have absolute confidence, do not show any disrespect to the gods, not even the slightest bit," she said solemnly. Prince Harrison's expression was one of struggle as he said painfully, "Mother, can we only be the tools of God? Just like those supervisors outside the city, we can be abandoned and slaughtered at any time." "Harrison, that was Viscount Angley deliberately misleading you. How can we nobles be as weak as those supervisors? No matter how the commoners make a fuss, they will not be able to shake our rule. No, this is not a question of whether or not our rule can be shaken. Viscount Angley is right. As long as we are concerned about whether or not the commoners can defeat the nobles, we will fall into the church's trap. The church does not care who wins or loses. They only want a qualified tool to rule. If the San Lorenzo family is unable to control the situation of the empire, then they can choose a new royal family. Unless we unite and rebel against that high and mighty. Shut up. Empress Medela suddenly stopped Prince Harrison's nonsense with a stern voice. Pulling her son's face closer to hers, Empress Medela warned with a gloomy expression, "Rebel? Harrison, do you think that even if those Eastern captives and supervisors outside the city unite, they can really resist the Black Cavalry?" Prince Harrison shook his head with a pained expression. Empress Medela sighed, "So, don't think about these dangerous thoughts anymore. Go to sleep. You are the first heir of the San Lorenzo family. As long as you do not do evil, what reason does the Pope have to refuse to crown you?" Prince Harrison hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say it. He lowered his eyes and nodded obediently, "Yes, mother, I understand." "That's good. Go to sleep." "Yes." Looking at her son who had fallen asleep again, Empress Medela's beautiful brows furrowed tighter and tighter. After a long while, she extinguished the magic lamp and walked out. There were no stars in the sky tonight. Only a silver moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling its cold light on the world. Colin's young face suddenly appeared in Empress Medela's mind. Then, an elusive smile crept onto her lips. "Garcia, is he your choice?" Chapter 162. Silvermoon City returned to its usual bustling state, as if the coup and bloody battle had never happened. However, observant people could sense a different aura from the half-elves. It was as if they were a completely different race. Lawrence Ullman sensed this change. As the eldest son of the Oman family and the first in line to inherit the title of Earl, Lawrence Viscounts had visited Silvermoon City a few times. Back then, when the half-elves saw him, they bowed very low, unlike now. Although they were still respectful, they were neither servile nor overbearing. "My apologies, Lord Viscounts. Our company's food has all been pre-ordered by the Angeli family." The Angeli family again. Viscount Lawrence was depressed. He had visited all the big and small companies in Silvermoon City these few days, only to find that the Angeli family had beaten him to it. Thinking of the half-elven nobles he had visited before, and how they had kept a respectful distance from him, Viscount Lawrence rubbed his chin and sighed. Colin Angeli, the true owner of Silvermoon City. "Lord Viscounts, there is a man outside who claims to be the eldest son of Earl Oman, Lawrence Viscounts, requesting to see you." Colin was stunned. He had not expected to meet someone from the Oman family in Silvermoon City. After thinking for a while, he casually gestured for the man to enter. Viscount Lawrence was a handsome and elegant young man in his 20s. He had a pair of wine-red eyes like his father, Earl Oman. He had an impeccable smile on his face, and his every move was refined and courteous. He indeed had the bearing of an earl's eldest son. However, Colin did not like him. He had never forgotten that the Oman family was highly suspected of plotting to assassinate him. Of course, on the surface, Colin pretended to be friendly. "Lord Viscount Lawrence, welcome to Silvermoon City." "Lord Viscount Angeli, thank you for your hospitality. My father has always said that you are a military genius, but I didn't expect it to be proven so quickly. In the Battle of Silvermoon City, your glorious feat of defeating the Eastern Border's Pegasus Legion with the remnants of the Black Cavalry and the half-elven Silvermoon Guard has spread throughout the northern frontier. Countless bards are singing your name." Viscount Lawrence's words of praise came out of his mouth with a sincere smile on his handsome face. Even though he knew that it was just polite words, it still made the person being praised feel his sincerity. "You flatter me." In the Battle of Silvermoon City, it was mainly due to the bravery of the soldiers. "I really didn't contribute much." Colin smiled and invited the other party to sit at the round table. He then asked the maid to bring them coffee. Viscount Lawrence sipped his coffee while looking at the decorations in the hall. He seemed to be deeply attracted by the murals and sculptures. After a while, he revealed a satisfied smile, as if he had obtained great satisfaction from appreciating them. Colin didn't have such appreciation ability. In his opinion, these famous paintings and sculptures might as well be exchanged for gold coins. May I know why Lord Lawrence has come to Silvermoon City? If there's anything I can help with, please feel free to tell me. Actually, it's like this. I'm sure you've already heard that the northern frontier is currently experiencing a famine. The Oman family's territory is no exception. That's why my father sent me to Silvermoon City this time to buy some food back to solve the urgent situation. However, I've been to all the large merchant guilds in Silvermoon City these past few days, and I've discovered that you've already bought all the food in advance. That's why I've shamelessly come here to buy some food from you. Colin put down his coffee cup and purposely put on a troubled expression. I see. Actually, I'm very willing to help the Oman family. After all, our families are related by marriage. However, the shortage of food in the Angeli family's territory is indeed a little too great. Even with the current food reserves in Silvermoon City, it's barely enough, so. Hearing Colin's excuses, Viscount Lawrence maintained a smile on his face, but he was already cursing in his heart. The half-elven kingdom's agricultural standards were renowned, and Silvermoon City had always been known as the Empire's granary. The food produced by the half-elven kingdom was more than enough to supply half of the northern frontier. Now, he was saying that it was barely enough to supply one Viscount's territory. Who was he trying to fool? Lord Viscounts, I can understand your difficulties. However, the Oman family does need help now. How about this, as long as you're willing to sell some of your food to us, I'll accept any price. Colin was overjoyed. I've been waiting for you to say that. He'd monopolized the food in Silvermoon City this time. Apart from supplying the Viscount's territory, he'd planned to sell the rest to make a fortune. Now that someone had come knocking on his door, of course he wouldn't be polite. Ahem, you're being too polite. Since the Oman family is so lacking in food, of course I won't leave them in the lurch. However, I won't take advantage of them either. I'll sell it to you according to the market price. Thank you, Lord Viscounts. Viscount Lawrence hurriedly expressed his gratitude. However, he understood that the so-called market price was definitely not the market price in Silvermoon City, but the market price in the northern frontier. However, the price of food in the northern frontier had already skyrocketed. How dare he say that he won't take advantage of them? Colin slowly raised his coffee cup and smiled. I'll arrange for someone to contact you. You can discuss the details of the deal with him. All right. Viscount Lawrence had no choice but to nod in agreement. Then, he asked, Lord Viscounts, may I ask when you'll return to the northern frontier? Tomorrow is Queen Aisha's coronation. I plan to return after attending the ceremony. Viscount Lawrence didn't seem surprised by this. He only smiled and reminded, Lord Viscounts, the northern frontier hasn't been too peaceful recently. Please be careful when you return. Colin's lips curled into a cold smile. With the black cavalry escorting me, I'd like to see who has the guts to do anything to me. Ah, that's right. I was overthinking. Viscount Lawrence smacked his head and laughed. After taking a sip of coffee, Viscount Lawrence spoke again, Lord Viscounts, I wonder if you've heard of a rumor circulating in the northern frontier recently. What rumor? The rumor says that the famine in the northern frontier is actually due to a plan by the Duke of St. Hilda. Colin's heart skipped a beat as he understood. However, he didn't show it on his face as he asked, what plan? When the trolls broke through the northern frontier's defense line and invaded the hinterland of the northern frontier, it was actually a show put on by the Duke. The goal was to numb the trolls and lure them out, thus giving the Black Cavalry a chance to win. Colin drank his coffee in silence, cursing in his heart. Wasn't this the plan that your old man, Count Oman, first proposed? Why are you trying to push the blame to the Duke of St. Hilda now? Didn't you say that it was a rumor? That probably doesn't have much credibility. That's right. However, if this rumor is true, then Lord Viscounts, do you think the Duke of St. Hilda is responsible for this famine? Colin blinked. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said with a solemn expression, if it's true, then the Duke of St. Hilda should indeed be responsible. Hearing Colin's answer, Viscount Lawrence finally revealed a sincere smile. The two then chatted for a while before Viscount Lawrence took his leave. Looking at the back view of the other party gradually disappearing, Colin could already confirm that a storm was about to engulf the northern frontier. I need some time. Colin slowly turned around and hugged the girl tightly in his arms. He comforted her. It's okay. I understand. Thank you. Vera gently pushed Colin away. You should go to the coronation ceremony. Don't be late. Are you really not going? No. Please apologize to Her Majesty for me. Okay. Colin held the girl's face and kissed her gently. He then turned around and left. Aisha Miller, today, in the name of the holy ancestors of the San Lorenzo family, I crown you. May the Supreme God of Light bless you so that you will not be violated in the future. May the God of Light guide you on the way forward and sweep away all obstacles in your way. You should take pity on your people and ensure their livelihood. You should respect your vassals and give them glory. You should protect the reputation of the half-elven kingdom so that it will not be covered in dust. Please remember that you are the Lord of Silvermoon City, the king of the half-elves, and a loyal vassal of the San Lorenzo family. May you live up to the expectations of the half-elves, the trust of His Majesty the Emperor, and the glory of the God of Light. Half-Elven Palace, inside the palace hall. Prince Harrison was wearing a golden robe and holding the half-elven crown in his hand. He had a solemn expression as he recited a lengthy prayer. His face was very pale, and he looked a little dispirited. It seemed that he had not been resting well recently. When Colin saw this scene, he could not help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He knew that he had successfully planted a seed of hatred in Prince Harrison's young heart. It was just waiting for the day when it would blossom and bear fruit and give the San Lorenzo family a surprise. As he thought of this, Colin could not help but look at Queen Medela, who was standing next to Harrison. This beautiful queen, whose facial features were quite similar to Vera, was actually looking at Colin at this moment. When their eyes met, Colin immediately put on a perfect smile and nodded at the other party. Empress Medela smiled as well. Her large, watery eyes stared unblinkingly at Colin, as if to say, young man, you have successfully attracted my attention. At this moment, Harrison finally placed the half-elven crown on Aisha's head. When the crowned half-elven queen stood up and faced the crowd, all the half-elven nobles present drew their swords and knelt on one knee, swearing, "My queen, I swear to be loyal to you from today until eternity." Queen Aisha lifted the hem of her dress and returned the bow to her vassals. Then the queen personally conferred the title of 4 knights, who were respectively her sword-bearer, bow-bearer, shield-bearer, and horse-bearer. Without exception, these knights were all members of the Miller family. From now on, they would accompany Queen Aisha and become her guardian knights. At this point, the coronation ceremony was officially over. Queen Aisha, wearing the half-elven crown on her head, left the hall surrounded by the crowd. She would host a banquet in the banquet hall to entertain the San Lorenzo royal family and the nobles who came to watch the ceremony. The sky was getting dark, and the lanterns were lit. On the floor of the banquet hall, which was paved with red paulownia wood, there were 3 long square tables filled with all kinds of delicious wine and food. Cream salmon pie, honey pine nut cake, smoked salmon salad, and the royal family's collection of champagne. Half-elven maids in colorful clothes stood like statues beside the long tables, ready to serve the guests who came to eat at any time. Unfortunately, there were not many guests who came to patronize, and even if they did, it was just a taste. When Colin walked into the hall alone, the banquet had not officially begun. He went straight to the long table, ignored the delicious food on the table, and went straight to his target, the deer blood wine. According to common sense, deer blood wine would not be served on the table in such a formal occasion, but obviously, this bottle of deer blood wine was specially prepared by Queen Aisha. At this time, a mature and lazy voice suddenly sounded, "Sir Viscounts, do you want some lemon?" Colin turned around and saw the main character of today's banquet, Queen Aisha, standing behind him. She wore a fiery red gauze dress and wore a half-elven crown on her golden hair. The bright smile on her face seemed to make the crystal magic lamps dim. "Okay." Colin smiled, understanding that the queen wanted to help him cover his scent, so he accepted her kindness. "Oh right, Vera is not willing to return to Ice Stone City with me. She wants to stay in Silvermoon City and wait for Marquis Garcia, so I hope you can help me look after her." "No problem, it would be my pleasure." "Okay, remember, do not let her return to chilly Winter City, even if the Duke of St. Hilda sends people to rush her." "I understand." At this time, there was a commotion at the entrance of the hall. Colin looked up and saw Queen Medela walking in with Prince Harrison. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but Queen Medela also wore a fiery red dress, revealing her slender arms and a large part of her smooth back. As she walked, her slender waist swayed gracefully, attracting the attention of all the nobles and gentlemen. Queen Aisha hurried forward to welcome them. Melodious music sounded, and the banquet officially began. Colin replied casually. "Am I that gullible?" Queen Medela stuck her chest out and pressed her entire upper body against Colin's. The distance between the two had already exceeded the limits of a normal ballroom dance. Colin shuddered and almost stepped on the wrong rhythm. Then, he heard Queen Medela whisper in his ear like a lover. "Viscount Angley, I'm serious. Your teaching of Harrison is actually very much to my liking. To tell you the truth, that's the fate of the San Lorenzo family for 1,000 years. Even if you didn't teach him, I would have done it sooner or later. So, my thanks are sincere. Furthermore, if everything you've said to Harrison is true, then we're actually natural allies." Colin couldn't help but tilt his head slightly and look at Queen Medela in his arms. A pair of dazzling and enchanting eyes seemed to have a soul-stirring charm. Colin almost couldn't help but indulge in them. "Your Highness, I don't quite understand what you're saying." Seeing that Colin was still deliberately playing dumb, Queen Medela giggled. "Colin." Queen Medela breathed into Colin's ear, and the way she addressed him became exceptionally intimate. "Actually, the power of this alliance is far beyond your imagination. Think about it carefully. When you understand it one day, you can come to me." Colin blinked and continued to play dumb. He cursed again in his heart. "Am I that gullible? You want me to work for you with just a few words?" Seeing that Colin didn't respond, Queen Medela wasn't discouraged. Instead, she smiled again and said, "As a thank you, I'll give you a little secret." "Please speak." Colin finally spoke. He wanted to see what other tricks the queen could play. "The sword that my brother gave you, do you know its origin? The Blade of Judgment?" Colin's heart skipped a beat. He nodded and said, "Yes, I know a little about it. It's said that it was originally the sword of Duke St. Theon." "Then you know what happened to the St. Theon family?" "Yes, I heard that they were exterminated." The smile on Queen Medela's face suddenly became unfathomable. How could a paladin family be so easily severed? "Oh." Colin raised an eyebrow, but he wasn't too surprised. "Then do you know where they are now?" Queen Medela didn't answer. Seeing this, Colin didn't pursue the matter. In fact, he wasn't very interested in this family. If he wasn't given the Blade of Judgment, Colin wouldn't have interacted with them at all. After a moment of silence, Queen Medela suddenly tilted her head and looked in the direction of Queen Aisha. She smiled and said, "Someone is trying to court your little lover." Colin looked over and saw Queen Aisha talking to a young man. The young man was none other than Lawrence Oman, who had visited Colin the day before. Colin smiled and denied, "Your Highness, you must have misunderstood something. How could Her Majesty be my lover?" Queen Medela smiled charmingly, obviously not believing Colin's denial. However, she didn't continue on this topic. Instead, she changed the topic. "Are the people of the Oman family very annoying?" "Your Highness, my sister married into the Oman family." Colin wouldn't admit that he hated the Oman family. "Is that so?" "Sorry, but I just don't like them, especially those red eyes." Queen Medela seemed to mention it casually. "Just like the St. Thean family back then, it makes people panic." Colin's heart skipped a beat as he said in surprise, "The St. Thean family also has red pupils." "That's right." Empress Medela suddenly smiled mysteriously. As if struck by lightning, Colin's expression instantly froze. Queen Medela's lazy voice sounded again, "Do you know how Count Oman's wife from the Su Duo family died?" "How did she die?" Queen Medela didn't say anything else. Colin understood that the other party was deliberately keeping him in suspense, probably wanting him to join the so-called alliance. Of course, he wouldn't fall for it. However, the information given by the Queen was enough to make Colin's imagination run wild. Names kept popping up in his mind as if they were out of his control. The St. Thean family, the Savoy family, the Oman family, the Su Duo family. Count Oman, Lady Penny, Lawrence, Madame Su Duo, Vala. Colin felt as if he had seen a clue that connected all the doubts from before. Under his full concentration, everything around him seemed to be far away. Unknowingly, the harp played the last note. At the end of the song, Colin stopped dancing like a puppet. But then, he felt a pain in his foot. When he looked down, he saw Empress Medela stomping on his foot without any hesitation. She even used all her strength to stomp on his foot. "You actually got distracted while dancing with me." "Viscount Angley, you're too rude." Colin grimaced in pain and hurriedly apologized to the Queen before sending her back to the side of the stage. Then, he smiled and greeted Viscount Lawrence, who was beside Queen Aisha. "Your Excellency Viscount Lawrence, we meet again." The slave leaders looked at each other and seemed to be moved. A smug smile appeared on Sar's face as he raised another finger. "Third, I've already contacted the slaves in the city. They will start a rebellion tomorrow night." "So, what are you afraid of?" This time, the slave leaders were even more restless as they began to whisper to each other. In the end, one of the slave leaders suddenly questioned Sar, "Why should we believe you?" Sar spread his hands. "Do you have any other choice? Either stay in Brass Town and gnaw on oars, or follow me to Ice Stone City and take a gamble." These words finally caused the expressions of most of the slave leaders to change. A flame called ambition was ignited in their eyes. After a fierce debate, the slave leaders finally came to a consensus. "All right, we'll go with you." The faint light of dawn slowly shone from the east, slowly tearing apart the darkness that enveloped the land bit by bit. The hazy light shone on the snow on the ground, sparkling and translucent. The slaves of Brass Town had already gathered in the wilderness north of the town before dawn. They were about to faint from hunger and could not wait to head to the place their leaders had promised them, a place filled with food. Sar looked at the 5,000 slaves gathered behind him, his heart full of ambition. Like a real general, he pointed in the direction of Ice Stone City and loudly ordered, "Advance." Unfortunately, the slaves' weak replies made his performance seem a bit comical. However, this little bit of awkwardness was unable to extinguish the flames of ambition rising in Sar's heart. He was like a real leader, leading his own army towards glory and victory. However, before they could walk far, the ground suddenly began to tremble slightly. The grass began to sway, and translucent dewdrops dripped down, finally sinking into the soil. The trembling of the ground grew stronger and stronger. Even the grass snapped and fell helplessly, sticking tightly to the ground. Tap tap tap, it was as if spring thunder had exploded the ground, or as if a flood was surging forth. The withered grass and shattered gravel on the ground began to tremble, as if boiling water was boiling. The continuous sound of hooves came from afar, as if the earth was about to be torn apart. Sar abruptly turned his head and saw countless black shadows suddenly appear in the east, instantly filling up the ground without a single gap. The weather changed, and even the sun that had just risen was covered by the black flag. The dense horde of cavalry swept towards the slave rebel army in Brass Town with an aura that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. The tall warhorses did not care about the existence of the grass and gravel at all, galloping on the ground that was still covered in a thin layer of snow. The snow that had yet to melt shattered under the hooves of the horses, emitting a dazzling light under the sun. Woo! An ear-piercing bugle sounded. That was the order to attack. In that instant, Sar felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His mind was blank, and he stood stupidly on the spot, as if he had become an ice sculpture. His past ambitions, unwillingness, dreams, and the beautiful figure buried in the depths of his memories melted like snow in front of this apocalyptic cavalry charge. It's the leader's army. Run! In front of this kind of attack, the slave rebel army did not even dare to think of resisting, and they scattered in a hubbub. However, this kind of action was no different from suicide. Even if the slaves were given 2 more legs, they would not be able to outrun the charging cavalry. Kill! Countless cavalry roared, and like wolves in a flock of sheep, they charged into the slave rebel army and began a bloody massacre. Blood flowed freely, and heads flew everywhere. In front of the unstoppable force of the black cavalry, the 5,000 rebel slaves were no different from 5,000 pigs. Colin casually chopped down a rebel soldier who was stunned on the spot, as if he had been scared silly by the charge of the black cavalry. Isn't this the filial son? Sneering in his heart, Colin did not have the slightest intention of stopping, and he urged his horse forward. It was as if he had just casually crushed an ant. Chapter 166. The rebellion in Ice Stone City was brought forward. The rebellion that was originally planned to start in the evening broke out near noon. The reason was very simple, even laughable: the slaves couldn't stand the hunger anymore. It was a fool's dream to make these starving slaves follow the plan strictly. Looking at the granary in front of them, how could the slaves hold back? They directly rushed up, throwing the plan of their leaders out of the window. As the battle cries rang out, the slaves gathered in the other granaries in the city decided to go all out. They directly tore off their masks and rushed up to steal the food. Steal the food, not give it out. The disorderly slaves made the word "steal the food" filled with the smell of blood. Countless starving slaves madly rushed into the granary, wanting to get some food out. However, the slaves who carried the food out were immediately surrounded and robbed by their companions who rushed in from behind. In the end, they started fighting among themselves. Countless slaves fell, and countless more squeezed in. Hysteria drowned their minds. There was no need for the city defense army to move. The granary became a battlefield for the slaves to kill each other. No one could peacefully steal the food from inside. The precious food was scattered on the ground, trampled on by the slaves, and even stained with blood. Some clever slaves saw that they couldn't charge into the granary, so they turned around and killed their way into the homes of the commoners. Thus, the screams of men and the cries of women and children rang out. These slaves formed groups and wandered around the city, burning, killing, robbing, and committing all kinds of crimes, as if they were venting the anger that had accumulated in the past. The city defense army under the leadership of the Knight of Charles urgently moved out. However, Ice Stone City was indeed in its weakest state right now. The Angeli family's army had already suffered heavy losses in the war with the trolls at the beginning of the year, and most of the veterans had been taken by the Knight of Rigo to Silvermoon City to support Colin. A few days ago, Baron Raymond led a group of troops to suppress the rebellion in Ice Lake Town. Currently, the Knight of Charles only had less than 2,000 regular soldiers, and they were all new recruits. In addition, there were 3,000 reserve soldiers. But at this time, whether it was the new recruits or the reserves, they all had to go to the battlefield, or else Ice Stone City would definitely be destroyed by the slave rebellion. Fortunately, although there were many slaves, their ability to organize. Forget it, they were not organized at all. They were a group of lunatics who only wanted to grab food to eat. The Knight of Seal first arranged for a large number of troops to guard the Red Castle, then sent troops to occupy the 4 city gates, locking the slave rebels in the city. There were also a few who were not afraid of death and actually charged at the Black Cavalry with simple weapons, but their fates were needless to say. As if they had poked a hornet's nest, the slaves fled in all directions amidst cries of alarm. Unfortunately, how could they escape the cavalry's pursuit? With a loud bang, dozens of figures were sent flying by the charging warhorses. Blood sprayed out in the air, and it was unknown how many of their bones were broken. The squads of Black Cavalry were like sharp knives cutting into butter. Their speed did not slow down at all as they trampled through the crowd of slaves just like that. The cavalry on the horses bent down skillfully, swung their blades, and used the horsepower to easily cut off row after row of heads. Countless mouthfuls of blood sprayed into the air and then onto the ground. Hundreds of cavalry galloped through the streets in front of the granaries like the wind, leaving behind a trail of blood. This was without a doubt a massacre. In front of the elite Black Cavalry, the rebellious slave army appeared so weak and laughable. Just one charge was enough to make them lose their courage. The slaves who were lucky enough to survive suddenly scattered, not even having the courage to look back as they fled in all directions as if their lives depended on it. However, it was a pity that they would encounter the Black Guard's cleanup team elsewhere. At this time, if one were to look down from above, the squads of Black Cavalry were like black dragons, shuttling back and forth on the streets of Ice Stone City, washing the slave army into pieces and sending flesh and blood flying everywhere. When Colin led the main force of the Black Cavalry to Ice Stone City, he discovered that the rebels in the city had already been cleaned up by the vanguard. Steward Aemon and Knight Charles were also already waiting outside the eastern city gate to welcome his arrival. "Sir Viscounts, welcome home." Colin laughed, his 2 legs lightly clamped on the horse's belly as he said loudly, "Let's go home." Chapter 167. Under the cold moonlight, Colin came to a balcony of the Red Castle. Behind him, the maids were busily setting up the tables and chairs. They also brought in 4 glasses of champagne and a few plates of dried fruits before quietly leaving. "Sit," Colin said to Aemon, Quincy, and Knight Charles with a smile. "Yes, master." "Yes, Lord Viscounts." The 3 of them sat down and raised their wine glasses, clinking them with Colin's. After taking a sip of wine, Butler Aemon was about to report to Colin about the recent political situation in Ice Stone City when Colin raised his hand to stop him. "Don't be in such a hurry. I have a question in my mind since returning from Silvermoon City. If I don't solve it, I probably won't be able to think about anything else." "Master, what is it?" Colin rubbed his chin and asked. "Count Amon's wife is the sister of the former Viscount Sue Duo, right?" "Yes." "Then what color is this countess's pupils?" Aemon turned to look at Quincy. Clearly, this old man who had been a tax official in Ice Stone City for decades should know. "Lord Viscounts, the countess's pupils are blue." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I watched her grow up. Even if I close my eyes, I can still recall her face." A smug smile appeared at the corner of Colin's mouth, as if a guess in his heart had been confirmed. However, out of caution, he still asked, "Has there ever been a direct descendant of the Sue Duo family with red pupils?" "Red?" Quincy thought for a moment and shook his head. "No, red pupils are rather rare. As far as I know, no direct descendant of the Sue Duo family has ever had pupils of this color." "That's right. Colin clapped his hands excitedly. He finally understood what the little secret that Empress Medela had only revealed half of in Silvermoon City was. Eamon, Quincy, and Charles looked at each other. Clearly, none of them could follow Colin's train of thought. Colin explained with a smile, Count Oman had red pupils, while the Countess had blue pupils. Then why did the Viscounts Lawrence have red pupils? Butler Eamon frowned and became even more confused. Quincy cautiously reminded him as well. "Milord, Viscounts Lawrence's red eyes were given to him by Count Oman. This shouldn't be a problem, right?" "No, there's a big problem." Colin's lips curled into a mysterious smile. However, Colin was a little worried about how to explain this genetic problem. There was no pea-growing Mendel in this world. People's understanding of genetics was still very shallow, and they didn't know the difference between recessive genes and dominant genes. In their understanding, it was normal for a father with red pupils to give birth to a son with red pupils. However, if one understood the basic theory of genetics, they would understand that this was not necessarily the case. Red pupils were rare, indicating that it was a recessive trait. For a recessive trait to be expressed in a child, he had to obtain a corresponding recessive gene from both the father and mother. In other words, Count Oman and the Countess had to both have the recessive gene of red eyes to give birth to a red-eyed son. Count Oman had no problem. His family had always had the gene of red eyes. However, the Su duo family did not. What was even more interesting was that Earl Oman's most beloved lover, Penny, was red-eyed. According to the laws of genetics, a child born of two red-eyed parents would definitely have red eyes. Just like how if both parents had single eyelids, the child would also have single eyelids. Thus, the color of the pupils of the Oman family's descendants was very interesting. Viscounts Lawrence, who wasn't supposed to have red eyes, had red eyes. Vala, who was supposed to have red eyes, had blue eyes. Colin was still worried that he had remembered wrongly, so he confirmed with Eamon. "What is the color of my brother-in-law Vala's pupils?" Eamon was confused, but he still replied, "It's blue, my lord." As expected. Colin was now sure. Excluding the fact that there was also a neighboring Old Wang in the Count's castle and genetic mutation, this was an extremely small probability. According to the laws of genetics and the pupils of the Count's descendants, Vala, the illegitimate child, was actually the child of Count Oman and the Countess. Lawrence, on the other hand, should be the child of Count Oman and his lover, Penny. Then why did Count Oman raise his son as an illegitimate child, while the illegitimate child was treated as the first heir to his title? There was only one explanation for this behavior that defied common sense. Penny's identity was probably even nobler than the Countess of the Su duo family. Combined with what Queen Medela had said, the Saint Thean family that should have been cut off also had the red-eye gene. Then, the truth of the matter was not hard to guess. Count Oman's lover, Penny, was probably a descendant of the Saint Thean family. Colin finally understood why Count Oman valued this illegitimate child so much. Not only did he help him marry the daughter of the Angeli family, but he also tried to assassinate Colin and help Vala obtain a baron's family business. If he was an ordinary illegitimate child of a noble, how could he have received such great help from his father? Count Oman's actions were clearly due to his guilt towards his true son, and he wanted to make it up to him. Thinking about it more deeply, Count Oman probably really did have bad intentions when he suggested to Duke St. Hilda to lure the enemy deep into their territory. His original intention was to use this to incite internal strife in the northern frontier, so that the St. Thean family could take the opportunity to make a comeback and take revenge. Unfortunately, the St. Hilda brothers were one step ahead and did not fall for his trick. The current coup in Silverymoon City, as well as the current rebellion in the northern frontier, probably had something to do with the St. Thean family. Colin had been suspicious about who had arranged for the Pegasus Legion to ambush the Black Cavalry in the shadowy canyon. The Duke of St. Hilda could not have done this, but the St. Thean family could. 300 years ago, it was the Dukes of the North who led the army to defeat the main forces of the St. Thean family, thus opening the curtains to the decline of this Paladin family. With the unerasable hatred between them and the House of St. Hilda, it was not difficult to gain the trust of the eastern region. Thus, it could be inferred that the coup in Silvery Moon City was related to the St. Thean family. For example, the Savoy family might have been a pawn of the St. Thean family. If one thought back to the time when the Savoy family fell, they would find that it was after the St. Thean family lost their power. Thus, the relationship between the two families was definitely not simple. The more Colin thought about it, the more he felt that his conjecture was not far from the truth. The only thing he was not sure about was what role the Duke of St. Hilda had played in this series of conspiracies. No matter how he looked at it, Colin did not think that he was a person who had been fooled by the St. Thean family. Since Queen Medela knew that the St. Thean family was hiding in the dark, there was no reason that her brother, the Duke of St. Hilda, did not know. Come to think of it, in the first conspiracy of the St. Thean family against the northern frontier, the Duke of St. Hilda was actually the one who had benefited the most. In the second conspiracy, the Duke of St. Hilda did not lose too much. Although the destruction of the Black Cavalry had greatly reduced the military strength of the northern frontier, it had also helped him completely eliminate the internal threats. The Duke of St. Hilda had deliberately hidden his sanctuary-level strength in order to stabilize the current situation. As long as he could continue to stabilize the situation, perhaps he would still be the one who had the last laugh this time. Of course, the St. Thean family would definitely not let the Duke of St. Hilda have his way so easily. The northern frontier was bound to be turbulent. Thinking of this, Colin suddenly asked, "By the way, do any of you remember what the St. Thean family emblem is?" Quincy thought for a moment and answered, "My lord, it's the colorful tiger." Chapter 168. My lord, what you said seems to make some sense. Steward Aemon chose his words carefully. However, the hesitation in his eyes made Colin understand that it was unrealistic for these people who didn't understand the basic principles of genetics to understand the complicated relationships among the descendants of the Aldman family. Aemon, if you have the time, you can plant some peas and see if two short-stemmed peas can produce taller ones. Then, you'll understand why I'm so sure that Vala isn't Count Aldman's illegitimate child. Yes, my lord. Aemon respectfully noted this down. He was truly prepared to study it in the future. As for the things I just said, whether you believe it or not, bury them in your hearts for now and don't spread it out. The development of the northern frontier should prove my conjecture. Yes. Colin raised his cup again and drank with his 3 retainers before saying, "All right, now you can tell me about the fief situation." "Yes, my lord." Aemon cleared his throat and then began to report to Colin about the development of the Viscount's fief. In the 4 months since Colin left, the fief's finances had recovered slightly from the disaster caused by the Trolls' invasion. However, due to the recent food crisis, the situation was still not optimistic. Fortunately, Colin had brought back a large amount of food from Silvery Moon City this time, so the situation would probably change soon. Ice Stone City's lowering taxes to attract trade was very successful. More and more merchants were now using Ice Stone City as a transit point for border trade. With Colin's current influence in Silvery Moon City, there would be even more half-elf merchants coming to Ice Stone City in the future. Therefore, the #1 trading city on the border that Quincy spoke of seemed to be taking shape. Of course, this kind of distant water couldn't put out a nearby fire. Currently, the Angeli family's finances could only be supported by the loans from the Tulip Merchant Guild. However, after taking control of the rich half-elf kingdom, as long as Colin didn't immediately start a war of aggression, then Queen Aisha would be able to support him. This was the benefit of keeping a rich woman. That's right, Colin felt that he was the one supporting Queen Aisha, not the other way around. After all, Queen Aisha's throne was won by Colin, so there was nothing wrong with it. After talking about the economy, it was time to talk about the military. The 3,000 infantrymen trained by Baron Raymond are already capable of fighting, but the 1,000 cavalrymen trained by Knight Charles are still lacking. Of course, it wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with the slave rebellion, but if they had to go to the battlefield to deal with the regular army, it would be difficult. However, the 6,000 black cavalry that Colin brought back this time could completely change the military strength of the Angeli family. In addition to the half-elven Silvermoon Guard that could be deployed at any time, Colin had now become a military force that could not be ignored in the north of the Empire. Especially in the current chaotic situation, Colin's weight was even more important. Aemon, send someone to Winter City and help me ask the Duke of St. Hilda to marry Miss Vera. Master, it would be more appropriate for you to personally go to Winter City for this kind of thing. Aemon hesitated for a moment before persuading him. But I can't leave. Now that the northern frontier is full of rebellions, it is more appropriate for me to stay in Icestone City. Besides, I have already personally asked the Duke once at Lion's Roar Castle, but the Duke didn't agree. Now that I am bringing up the old matter again, even if I am not present, it is not too rude. Aemon thought for a moment and felt that what Colin said was reasonable, so he didn't insist. All right, Master, I will arrange it. Colin nodded in satisfaction. He wouldn't go to Winter City personally at this time. Other than having to stay in Icestone City, he was also worried that he would be schemed against by the scheming Duke. In the current situation at the northern frontier, as long as Colin sat on the fishing platform, both the House of St. Hilda and the St. Thean family would have to rope him in. Therefore, Colin felt that if the Duke of St. Hilda was smart, he would definitely not reject his marriage proposal. Also, send someone to pay attention to the movements of Marquis Dawson and Earl Amon and report to me at any time. Colin felt that the most important cards in the St. Thean family's hands were probably these two. He just didn't know if other families would join in. Yes, Master. Aemon nodded and then reminded, Master, I am afraid that we will have to pay attention to the trolls' movements. Trolls? Colin finally realized that he had almost overlooked the northern frontier's mortal enemy. Although the trolls' main army had just been wiped out by the Black Cavalry, with the Empire's foundation, it wasn't impossible for them to put together another army of 100,000 in the near future. With this kind of strength, in the northern frontier where civil strife was about to erupt, they would have a lot of weight. Moreover, Colin had already realized that the relationship between the St. Thean family and the trolls was not simple. During the first Northern Frontier Rebellion, the trolls had been the St. Thean family's greatest support. This time, Colin remembered that the St. Thean family's most important chess piece in Silvery Moon City was Sith Savoy, who had been introduced to him by Prince Okamoto. Thinking of this, the situation that the Duke of St. Hilda was about to face was much more severe than Colin had imagined. Send someone to keep an eye on the trolls. Inform me if there is any news. Yes, Master. Charles, help me train another 3,000 cavalrymen. If the instructor doesn't have enough men, you can find Knight Roger. Yes, Lord Viscounts. When the Knight of Rigo returns to Icestone City, have him recruit another 5,000 infantrymen and train them. Colin now felt a sense of urgency. If he wanted to protect himself in the upcoming Northern Frontier Rebellion, or even take advantage of the situation, he had to quickly expand his army. Steward Aemon frowned and advised, Master, if you do this, the financial pressure on our family will be too great. You don't have to worry about this. Colin waved his hand and said heroically, I have already reached an agreement with Queen Aisha. The Half-Elven Kingdom will support the construction of our army, and in return, I will help the half-elves defend against foreign enemies. That's great. Aemon and the other two obviously didn't understand the relationship between Colin and Queen Aisha. Now that they heard that this agreement was so beneficial to the Angeli family, they were instantly filled with disbelief and joy. This agreement was basically saying that the Half-Elven Kingdom would pay to support the Angeli family's army. Colin smiled reservedly and then changed the topic, regarding the rebellion in Icestone City this time. Do you think that someone is behind it? Aemon immediately said, Master, I suspect that the Tulip Merchant Guild is behind it. Although there is no direct evidence, they were the first to start hoarding food, causing the price of food to skyrocket and thus causing the famine. Then immediately arrest the person in charge of their merchant guild in the city. Master, if we do this, won't it agitate Count Aldman? After all, the chairman of the Tulip Merchant Guild is his lover, Penny. You don't have to use the reason of inciting a rebellion to arrest people. Collins suddenly thought of the method the old king of Silvery Moon City used to deal with the Hyacinth Chamber of Commerce. Then what reason should we use? Just say that we suspect that they are evading taxes. This was the emblem of the House of St. Prospero, a pure white Pegasus. As night fell, a bonfire was lit in the square. Hundreds of Eastern knights dressed in pure white armor surrounded the sculpture. They all looked solemn as they held their swords and bowed their heads in prayer. Below the statue, a woman in a white priest robe was leading the knights in prayer. Her voice was dreamy, yet solemn and dignified. The glory of the Lord is everywhere. It will lead the souls of the deceased back to his temple. Rest in peace, fearless warriors. The priestess looked to be in her 40s, but she was still charming. The holy radiance that enveloped her gave her a strange charm. At the end of her prayer, a middle-aged man in a duke's robe strode into the square. He was the master of the Eastern region, the Duke of St. Prospero. The Duke of the Eastern region came to the front of the priestess, put his left hand on his chest, bowed and said, "May the grace of the Lord of Glory last forever. May the souls of the deceased warriors rest in peace." His voice was soft, with a hint of hoarseness, but it was very infectious. After the Duke of the Eastern region finished speaking, he raised his head, and his face instantly became stiff. He pulled out his sword from his waist, raised it over his head, and pointed it at the sky. "But their will be inherited, and their hatred will be remembered by us." Clang! In a series of sounds of swords being pulled out, the knights gathered in the square followed the example of the Duke of St. Prospero. They raised their swords to the sky and shouted in unison, "Inherit the will, remember the hatred." After the ceremony, the knights dispersed one after another. The Earl of Avon slowly walked over and saluted the Duke of St. Prospero and the priestess, "Father, Mother." It turned out that the priestess was the Duchess. The Duke of St. Prospero looked at his second son and said in a cold tone, "What? Are you also here to help the Viscounts of Austin?" The Earl of Avon rolled his eyes and smiled, "I'm actually here to help my brother." "What do you mean?" "Your brother is still a prisoner of the Angeli family. What's the use of you coming to me?" The Earl of Avon didn't directly answer the question, but instead said, "Father, the Viscounts of Austin has been kneeling in White Dew Castle for 3 days and 3 nights, and he hasn't eaten a drop of water. If this goes on, even with the body of a 4th-grade knight, I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on." "Humph. You sympathize with him? Then who will sympathize with the 200,000 soldiers of the Pegasus Legion?" "No, Father, I don't sympathize with the Viscounts of Austin. It's just that if the Deputy Viscounts of Austin kneels to death in White Dew Castle, then, as the commander, what punishment will Marquis Vincent receive?" The Duke of St. Prospero raised an eyebrow and snorted, "You're really here to plead for your brother." The Earl of Avon chuckled and persuaded, "Yes, Father. If you're not willing to forgive the Viscounts of Austin now, then when you redeem my brother in the future, what reason will you have to forgive him?" The Duke of St. Prospero said unhappily, "Why do you think I'll forgive that trash Vincent?" "Oh. You don't intend to forgive my brother? That's great." The Earl of Avon clapped his hands and shouted even more excitedly, "Then when can I inherit my brother's title of Marquis?" "In your dreams." The Duke of St. Prospero glared and said angrily. But the Earl of Avon wasn't frightened at all. Instead, he asked with a shocked expression, "It can't be, Father. If you don't pass the title of Marquis to me, who do you intend to pass it to? It can't be Anna, right?" With that silly look of hers, are you really going to hand the eastern region to her? The Duke of St. Prospero was so angry that he was panting heavily. His right hand gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, as if he was going to slash his worrisome son in the next second. All right, stop arguing. The Duchess stood up at the right time to smooth things over. Evan, you're not allowed to speak to your father in such a tone in the future, and you're not allowed to slander your brother or sister. Yes, mother. The Earl of Avon shrank his head back. It seemed that he was more in awe of this kind mother who spoke in a calm and unhurried manner. Then, the Duchess turned to look at her husband. You too, are you going to draw your sword against your own child? And that Viscount of Austen, don't let him die in White Dew Castle. That will tarnish your reputation. I know. The Duke of St. Prospero sighed and strode into the castle. But after taking a few steps, he saw that the Earl of Avon didn't follow, so he turned back and ordered, hurry up, I have something to ask you. Yes, father. Chapter 170. Stand up, Viscount Austen. Yes. Your Grace. Viscount Austen struggled to stand up, but after kneeling in the snow for 3 days, his legs were completely numb. He tried several times but failed. In the end, he finally stood up with the help of the Earl of Avon. The Duke of St. Prospero did not show any sympathy or pity. He glanced at the two of them indifferently and then walked into the castle first. Sit. Thank you, Your Grace. Viscount Austen, whose legs were trembling and could not stand properly, hurriedly sat down as if he had been pardoned. However, in front of the Duke of St. Prospero, he still did not dare to lean against the back of the chair and only sat down halfway. I was going to kill you for sending my 200,000 soldiers to their deaths. Viscount Austen trembled when he heard this, but the Duke's next words made him sigh in relief. However, in consideration of the Austen family's hundreds of years of loyalty, I have decided to spare your life. Thank you, Your Grace. The Austen family will definitely remember your benevolence. A trace of disdain flashed through the Duke of St. Prospero's eyes as he looked at the Austen Viscounts who was about to cry. However, he still said patiently, go to Ice Stone City and tell Viscount Angley that I agree to his suggestion of exchanging prisoners. Use Garcia to exchange for Vincent. Yes. Viscount Austen hurriedly replied. Then, seeing that the Duke of St. Prospero had no other orders, he hurriedly stood up and left. Then, the hall became quiet. Neither father nor son spoke first, as if they were competing in patience. In the end, it was the Duke of St. Prospero who could not stand his son's lazy appearance and scolded, "Why are you still here?" Earl of Avon had an innocent expression as he spread his hands and said, "Father, didn't you tell me to follow you and say that you have something to ask me?" The Duke of St. Prospero's eyes widened. He just wanted to draw his sword and kill this unruly, unfilial son of his. But in the end, he forced himself to calm down and asked in a deep voice, "Do you think we should intervene in the current situation on the northern frontier? Do we still have the strength to intervene?" The Earl of Avon asked bluntly, "The ground troops of the Pegasus Legion have basically been wiped out by my good brother. Are you going to dispatch the navy to the northern frontier? Or do you want to recruit the private soldiers of the lords of the eastern region and let them fight for us against the northern frontier? So you think we can only watch from the sidelines? At the very least, we no longer have the strength to invade the northern frontier with great fanfare. However, it's not like we can't do anything." The Duke of St. Prospero's expression turned slightly better as he asked, "What should we do? The current situation on the northern frontier is on the verge of breaking out." Next, the House of St. Theon and the House of St. Hilda will definitely fight to the death. But before they are exhausted, we can't easily get involved. Otherwise, just like this time in the shadowy canyon, we will become the sword in the hands of others. Hearing this, the Duke of St. Prospero's eyebrows twitched. Obviously, his son had hit a sore spot, but he didn't lose his temper and continued to listen. "So, Our best choice now is to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. At the same time, you need to pay attention to two key figures. Which two? Marquis Dawson and Viscount Angley. The Earl of Avon slowly spat out the two names and then explained, Marquis Dawson wants to realize the dream of the dwarves and has no loyalty to the House of St. Theon. Whoever can help him realize this dream, he will side with that person. So, this is a force that we can rope in. As for Viscount Angley, through the battle in Silvermoon City, you must have seen his ability clearly. Although he is currently under the Duke of St. Hilda's force, I always feel that his loyalty is not firm. He is also someone that we can rope in. The Duke of St. Prospero nodded slowly, expressing his agreement with his son's words. The Earl of Avon continued, in addition, the attitude of the royal family is also very important. I think, with the hatred between the San Lorenzo family and the House of St. Theon, they probably won't be willing to see the northern frontier fall into the hands of the House of St. Theon. It is very likely that when the House of St. Hilda can't hold on, they will personally step in. If the San Lorenzo family personally sends troops to the northern frontier, then what chance does the House of St. Theon have of winning? Not necessarily. The Earl of Avon shook his head. Many people hope that the northern frontier will change hands. Who do you mean by many people? The Earl of Avon's smile suddenly became somewhat playful. Aren't you one of them? The Duke of St. Prospero suddenly quieted down. Even the slightly disrespectful gaze of the Earl of Avon could not anger him. However, the Duke of St. Prospero did not respond to his son's rhetorical question. After a long silence, the Earl of Avon suddenly yawned and said with a smile, Father, if there is nothing else, I will go back and rest first. The Duke of St. Prospero nodded and did not say anything more. Looking at his son's back slowly disappearing outside the hall, the Duke of St. Prospero's eyes became somewhat conflicted. What, are you tempted? A soft voice suddenly sounded, and the Duchess, who had changed her clothes, appeared in the hall. The Duke of St. Prospero seemed to understand what his wife was talking about. He sighed and shook his head. Evan is indeed smart, but, to become the Lord of the Eastern region, intelligence alone is not enough. Not to mention. The Duchess stepped forward and gently rubbed her husband's shoulders, softly saying, Are you worried about the lords of the Eastern region? Yes. Vincent has been the Marquis of the Eastern region for so long, and I have been training him as the first successor. So many lords of the Eastern region have already placed their bets on him. If I cripple him now, those lords may not have the guts, right? Humph. Those who did not place a heavy bet are of course indifferent. But Earl Hall, he married his most precious daughter to Vincent. And Earl Bruggen, you know how much financial support his Chamber of Commerce has provided to Vincent. And the Aston family, they are almost completely tied to Vincent. I don't know whether to call them smart or stupid. Once these families see that I cripple Vincent and let their years of investment go down the drain, do you think they will not resent me? Especially when the Pegasus Legion has just suffered a heavy blow. If we are not careful, it may cause chaos. With a sigh, he continued leisurely, to be honest, I actually admire the Duke of St. Hilda for having the courage to lay hands on his own vassals. If I can do a great purge in the Eastern region, that idiot Vincent's Marquis position will be abolished. The Duchess was silent for a long time before she spoke again, but if you are so biased toward Vincent, Evan will only become more and more resentful. The Duke of St. Prospero sneered, without the support of corresponding strength, what's the use of his resentment? The Duchess' eyes flashed, and she suggested, it's not too late for you to start helping Evan cultivate his forces now. The Duke of St. Prospero pondered for a moment, but still shook his head. Let's wait and see. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.